Hello. Okay, so everybody can hear me. Damn, this software is a problem. Welcome to Lemurstream 21, non-permissive environment. Iche, did you want to come on now or later, big guy? Eternalism is listening to the dulcet tones of the lemur over Iche's ambient soundscape. Okay, cool. I'll just read the chat till then. Tonight was supposed to be a cozy stream, but given recent events on social media, we're going to have to address those, I think. Going to have to get a little bit aggro. But since Eche is coming on, it'll be semi-cozy. Big boy aggro. That's right. Can you hear how worked up I am already? Jonathan, what's going on is a successive shuttering of the right in the big tech public space, and not just distant rightists like us, but more mainstream Trump cheerleaders. So what we'll do is we'll have see what Edshay up to, see if he cares to chime in, and then I have a few points to run through. And after that, we'll see if anybody else wants to come on. Yeah. Hey there, Edshay.
Hey, buddy, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Nice.
How's it going?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I thought I wasn't gonna be able to stream,
Oh,
but
well,
okay.
you're here now.
Yeah, am I echoing? I swear there's an echo.
I can't hear an echo.
Okay, it's
It's
coming
just a
in
bit of
from.
ambient noise in your background, though.
Okay, all of it's going away right now. Okay, let's see here. Where am I getting this from? Oh! I know where it's coming from. I had to isolate some things. I think I get it now. Could you say something?
Hello, hello.
Okay, brilliant. Oh, thank God. I'm sorry.
This
That was
is
me.
a Lima space.
Yeah. Oh, God. Sorry about that. I forgot to set audio levels through my computer. My apologies. Okay, I'm here now. Like actually, and I'm not. I am retarded, but I'm now retarded with proper sound levels. Okay, good. There we are. How's it going?
Well, join the club, Eche, because I
Yeah.
once again messed up my microphone, and I don't even know how it happens.
Okay. Good. Nice. I don't feel so bad then. That's great.
Hmm.
Like.
So
So
lay
what?
it on us, Eche. What's been happening?
Uh, just that this has been my birthday week, so I've been running around and doing things, and I don't know. It's hard to explain, but when you find yourself going to like parties or like doing things or whatever, it's like, well,
Hmm.
it does end up having to take priority and precedence. So there have been several instances where I've had to prioritize real life over the stream, which is why every so often I've been just hitting clicking the start stream, but with an album, which is kind of bullcrap, and I know it, but it's just where I am right now. So at any rate, but
Right.
overall,
So,
it's been
have
fun
you
though.
procured a cake etche?
That's the weird thing. I have not. Of all the things you'd expect that I actually would have had cake by now, but
Hmm.
I've not actually had any cake. But, and this is perfectly acceptable. My mother has promised that she will actually bake me a pie,
Ooh.
and this is not just any pie. I'm actually genuinely proud of this. This is a pie, an apple pie that is my grandmother's recipe. Now, saying that it's my grandmother's recipe makes it sound like, okay, it's probably not too bad. That's fine. No, no, no. My grandmother, I don't know if you have these where you live, Julian, but here in the States we have what are called county fairs. And at the county fair, it's essentially just a large, like multiple cities put together into a larger grouping, and all of those cities they pool together to have some kind of a large festival or something. And at the county fair, um, my grandmother, she won the blue ribbon for her apple pie for 2 years. So, blue ribbon winner, 2 years. That's freaking huge, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm very proud of this recipe. It's a very good recipe.
Birthday pie, eh?
Heck yeah, man. Apple pie, no less. What could possibly be more
There's
American
nothing
than that?
nothing more American than apple pie.
That's right. Oh, that's right. It's even going to be my mom making it, so it's perfect. It's
Wow.
outstanding. Yeah. It's mom and apple pie, buddy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, can you get candles and pie?
Well, you could, but it's not the same. And I don't really care. Truth be told, I'm not much of a cake fan, to be
Hmm.
perfectly honest. A lot of people, they douse their cake in frosting and icing and whatnot, and I don't really care for that. So, the kinds of cakes that I typically liked like pound cakes when I was a kid.
Hmm.
Anything that had a little more girth to it, and with that, like my personal favorite was always pound cake, uh, heavy cream, and strawberries. Strangely,
Hmm.
that was my favorite way of eating any kind of a cake. And if I was going to have cake, I think that would probably be what I do. Just find a really good pound cake and some cream and some strawberries and just make that be the thing. So I might do that. I might not. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have a sweet palate either, but occasionally I appreciate a very boutique chocolate cake, just very like understated.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. There are these, something like a mousse or something like that, but like a chocolate cake mousse kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, but I've had these here in the States. They're very popular in certain kinds of boutique bakeries or whatever. And it's cake, but it has sort of an almost creamy quality to it at the same time. So yeah, I think the reason that the icing is such a big deal is because so often the cakes are very dry and not very good at all. So they make up for it by putting a crap load of icing on it. But it's my opinion that a really good cake doesn't need icing. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
that's just my own opinion. And so with I like your phrasing, boutique cake. I think that's more or less the line of thinking that I have for myself with regards to my taste in cakes. So,
Mm,
but yeah, that's
yeah.
where I am right now.
Excellent. Well, happy birthday anyway, Etche. Have a good
I,
one. Have a
yeah,
good one.
totally.
All the way from New Zealand.
I like it from the other side of the freaking planet. Heck yeah,
Damn,
somehow
yeah, yeah.
it's
Press
traveling all the way
press
through.
one press one in the chat for Etche's birthday.
Oh heck yeah, dude! It's gonna ripple through the freaking globe, man. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. Going
So,
international birthdayism.
oh, international. Oh, that makes me want to play some Todd Rundgren. Hell yeah, that'd be funny. I might do that tomorrow. That'll be cool. I don't know if you know that track. Todd Rundgren, International Feel.
I
You
may
know
have
that?
I may have heard of it. I probably just don't pick up the name.
Okay, that's fine. I'll play it in tomorrow's stream because it'll be fun. I might do like a little rock and roll stream or something tomorrow. So
Okay, yeah, that sounds
that'll be
good.
an amazing thing.
Sounds
Yeah. Thank you,
cozy.
everyone. Yeah, yeah. And thank you to everyone, by the by. I appreciate it very much. And I also appreciate you, Julian, doing a stream and having me on. It's quite nice. So you had some points, though. What were the points that you wanted to go over?
I had a little oration in my mind. It was just to do with the banning over the last few days. Have you been following that?
You're referring to Alex Jones, yeah?
Well, Alex Jones a few days ago, and then today Twitter took out McInnes and all the Proud Boy accounts.
Get the heck out of Dodge. No freaking way.
Oh yeah.
Oh, wow. The purge is formally happening. This is it, man. This is the
Mm-hmm.
deal. Oh, that's right. And they also, Twitter, they suspended Candace Owens because she substituted Jew for white. Forgot about that.
That's another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That escaped my attention, but I recall it now. Yeah. So, to my way of thinking, and some other people have noted this to me as well, um, they're preparing a system-wide clampdown on all populist mobilization vectors, not just the ones confined to the radical fringe where we circulate.
Well, like, what? This sounds like you're moving directly into your oration. I'd like to hear more about this.
Um, well, I
And
think
also,
I've got the
I was
points here, so we might as well just move through them discursively. What do you think, Etche?
that sounds beautiful. And I just realized I have to make this. I want to go ahead and announce. I actually don't know much about this because earlier today, I had wicked insomnia, so I slept through most of the day. I literally only woke up I formally at like 4 o'clock today or something, maybe five or whatever. So
Right.
uh, I'm really not. I have no idea what the hell is going on in the world at all. So when you just said that Gavin McInnes got freaking banned, I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
that's just the new information we have today, but we've seen the broader trend play out over the last week, I guess.
Jeez, dude. Yeah, apparently Trivium is saying that H3H3 live stream was banned as well today. But I mean, those guys are freaking cucks, dude. Like they're not very. I mean, why ban those guys? Like they don't do anything edgy at all. I don't think anyway.
I actually haven't heard of them. I just saw that they got banned for talking about Jones.
Yeah, H3H3 is like this weird. It's like this dude and this chick. I think they're married. I'm not sure. And he used to make fun of feminists or whatever. And he had a really funny meme where he pretended to get triggered and you probably saw it once or twice, but it's just him sitting back in a chair, making a silly face, and he's shaking in the chair, and it says "triggered" at the bottom in a yellow box with black lettering. It says "triggered," and the box is shaking, and it makes it look like the triggering is like a physical event. It's pretty funny, but that's the only thing that you might know him from. But that's the extent of his edginess. It's just making fun of feminists. That's not particularly edgy. The idea of banning him seems ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean I haven't looked into it, but it seems it was because of his comments on Alex Jones, not the whatever he was up to before.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I can't imagine what his comments were. I mean, do you know them?
No, that's what I say. I only just saw
Oh,
the
that's
a
right. That's
tweet
right.
on
What am I
about it. I
thinking?
didn't even know this guy existed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh. Well, I I kind of want to. I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to go ahead and let you talk about what you want to talk about, and then go ahead and prompt me when you're done. Prompt me, and I'll unmute. Okay.
Well, don't we just move through it like
Okay, that's fine.
back and
That's fine.
forth. That's probably easiest. It's easier
That's
for
fine.
me as well because I tend to lose my thread sometimes in longer monologues.
It's okay.
So
Don't worry about it. It's fine.
now that we've set the scene, we've
Yeah.
established Proud Boys have gone, InfoWars was banned across multiple platforms. The
Oh my
next
God.
point I was going to move on to is that the right has made no response to this. Uh, there was nothing from the establishment right, which pretends to support freedom of speech. They just make the argument that these are private companies, they can do what they want. We all know that's bogus because this is the public space now. And then you have people like Jones himself ranting bizarrely that this was the Chicoms who did this to him. Uh, this guy seems to have no sense whatsoever, apart from hitching his wagon to Trump. That seems to be the one sensible thing he's done. And he has millions of subscribers. He's got databases of users that have brought super male vitality or whatever. Instead of this impotent ranting, he could actually be organizing these people and directing them toward a focalized collective form of action against these major tech companies. And of course, for whatever reason, just the learned helplessness, I guess, of right wingers, he's not doing that. So the upshot from that means that big tech has learned it can take out major pro Trump outlets, and conservatives and the right in general won't do anything. So that is a rather worrying precedent. What do you think, Ed?
Um, I just had some peanut butter. I'm sorry about that. Um, yeah, I agree. I've noticed a lot of people on the right failing to stick up for themselves, and one of the more worrying ones for me, well, not worrying, a sign of the times. Laura Ingraham walked back from her declaration that
Mm-hmm.
she found the demographic changes worrisome. So she cocked. She totally cocked.
Mm.
And I've seen a lot of these kinds of things from the right all the time. Just as you're mentioning with the oh, it's a private company. It's a private company. We can't rag on them. The problem is that the radical left, they're doing everything that they can think of to suppress free speech, to suppress dissidents, and to suppress anything that they disagree with, anything that challenges them. And this game of whack-a-mole, they're really good at it, and the right is not playing that game. And I think that it's high time that the right start playing that game in some way. The only problem is that the right does not control any of these institutions at all.
Mm.
And the only thing they could possibly do would be to utilize government control of some sort, in some sense. And I see a lack of will on the part of Republicans, just as I'm hearing you note, to do anything about it. They're silent. They're totally silent. When the word racist is used, the first thing they do is say, "Oh, I'm not. I'm not. I'm totally not. Look at my based black MAGA hat wearing buddy over here, Candace Owens or whatever." They always do that. Or look at Diamond and Silk. Look at Diamond and Silk. We love Diamond and Silk. Do you see?
Yeah.
And I mean, fine, whatever. If people are into that, fine. I have no problem with it. I really don't care. I mean, truth be told, I think Diamond and Silk are kind of funny. So, like, whatever. I don't listen to them, but, you know, back in 2016, I thought it was hilarious that they triggered so many people. So, of course, I would share all their bullshit because I was like, whatever, dude. It triggers the left. Fuck it. Go with it. Um, But the thing is that it doesn't fundamentally it doesn't matter. You shouldn't have to point to Diamond and Silk and say, "Look, but I follow Diamond and Silk." It shouldn't matter. You should be able to say, "Look, I have my views. You can call me whatever you want. I know who I am, and I'm not what you're calling me. So fuck off." And the right is terrible at doing that. And I think that uh, a good example of this mindset is Millennial Woes. He was saying something to the effect of, this is a little over a year ago. He was saying something to the effect of someone called him a racist, and he looked at them and he said, "Yeah, and." That's perfect. That's the best response possible. Because like, who fucking cares? They're gonna call you that anyway. It doesn't matter. So I think that the right needs to firstly stand strong and say, "I don't fucking care what you're calling me. I don't give a shit. What you're saying may or may not be true. It doesn't matter because all you're going to do is attack me. All of your words are attack, whether true or not. They're merely attacks. So what you say matters not. What does matter is if they incur damage. That's the real key. That's the trick. That's the problem. The left is incurring damage. They are issuing all manner of threat, and they're making good on it. And the right has no defense whatsoever. Rather, let me rephrase that. The right need not defend themselves. Instead, they are taking up a defensive position. And the problem is that in taking up a defensive position, they're playing directly into the game of the leftists. The leftists need us to be defensive. The moment we become defensive, they get this is so beautiful too. It's psychologically beautiful. They say you're racist. You say nuh-uh, and then they say the lady doth protest too much methinks.
Yeah,
So they win. They fucking win.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to stop that. We have to stop it immediately. And amongst the things that I think that the right needs to learn to do is exercise what control they have. And in my opinion, political power is probably the direction it's going to have to go. And I mean, I don't. The problem is that there's no will. The Republicans at the upper end, they are not right wing in any sense. They're barely conservative. They're not conserving a whole hell of a lot these days. They're basically Democrats from like 40 years ago. So, like, whatever. And they're not going to do anything to protect what should be their base. So even though I don't know what to count myself as, to be perfectly honest, but I still, as of this moment, I align myself very much with the right. And I genuinely wish that there was someone that I could vote for. I wish there was someone that I could point to and say, "Look, that guy, that fucking guy, I like that guy," who actually had, you know, some level of power. We don't have that. We don't have any cover. We don't have anything, any kind of protection. This is very distressing. And the purges do nothing but highlight our vulnerability, and I don't care for it in the least. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm going off on some weird freaking monologue. What else were you going to say?
No, you make some very good points there. And one thing I'd add to that is the conservatives at the top in the more establishmentarian positions, they draw their moral premises from the left and simply make a few adjustments to them. So they're hopeless. They're always going to cave to the left because when the left really puts pressure on them and says, "Look, these adjustments you're making to our principles are actually letting in people we both fundamentally disagree with," then those establishmentarians will always follow the left's pressure in that department. And then at the bottom of the stack, at the so-called grassroots, there's learned helplessness, as we see with Jones.
Yeah, I really find that distressing myself. I mean, good God, it's so frustrating because I want to do something, and I mean, my level of irritation moves into being physically agitated, and yet the most that I can do is what? Put up a couple of goddamn stickers. That's it. That's all I can fucking do. I mean, it's sometimes I feel like I'm one of these learned helpless people. I mean, how do I express this? There's no cohesion. Rather, there's a lack of cohesion. There are individual people that are very passionate about some of these ideas, that are very passionate about how do I the alt-right position, for want of a better phrasing. There are people who are passionate about the alt-right position, but they're not in any positions of power. Number one. Number two, anytime they move into anything that even resembles action of any sort, they're immediately attacked, they're lambasted, and no one comes to their aid. No one comes to help them. So they're just sort of left dangling in the wind.
Mm.
And the brutal irony is that, and again, I align myself with the alt-right, even though I don't formally count myself as it. The problem is that it's no one is helping these people. We're left dangling in the wind. Even though I'm not alt-right, I still count myself as being aligned, and I feel like I'm dangling in the wind too, because the fact of the matter is my ideas, they do overlap, and it's very vexing. It's frustrating that there's no one able to represent my ideas in any kind of an official capacity. So the closest that we can possibly come at the moment is what, like uh, Trump, I guess, kind of ish in a way, but not really. He doesn't seem like a race realist in any sense. He seems like a standard Civ Nash, which, fine, whatever, it's fine. He's at least talking about the wall, which is a good start. It's a movement in the correct direction as far as I'm concerned, but that's the closest we've got. Come on, this is terrible. And I don't
It's a
like.
good start, but there has to be more. And you actually bring up a extremely important point when you talk about the isolation of our endeavors. And I've referred to it in the past as the right wing anarch problem, where there's people who can set themselves apart from the current order, but that the very capability which allows them to do so means they're habituated to stay aloof rather than coordinate. And if you can't
Yeah,
coordinate, you won't win in politics because it's a plural game.
yeah, yeah. And this is why, even though I still count myself as not being formally a part of the alt-right, I'm very happy
Mhm.
to work with and to discuss and to coordinate with people, because as
Yeah,
far as I'm concerned, we're all on the same general team, even though, there's some people who are, further to the right or further to the left or whatever. At the same time, we're still kind of all on the same team, and that's the point. That's
yeah.
really the thing that's missing, is that people aren't recognizing that, dude, we're all going down on this ship together. We got to start building rafts.
Or my preferred terminology now is the dissident right. I think the alt-right label has had its day, and that kind of means because it's a negative definition, you've got a lot of room to maneuver in your personal niche.
Fair enough. I keep thinking that I ought to, because I do it when I think about it, but when I don't think about it,
Hmm.
I always forget. But when I do think about it, I like the term nationalist,
Yeah.
uh, because it's very easy, it's simple, it implies race realism, and again implies, but like on a deep level,
Mm.
national,
Natal.
natal,
Yeah.
birth, yeah. So
Yeah, that's a point Lauren Rose made, and it's
yeah.
remains a good one. But
Oh, it's
anyway,
excellent.
those are good points, and we'll circle back to them later as we move through my list here.
Oh yeah, please.
Before we go on, it's also worth noting that the ADL caricature that posts over at Gab has forced Torba to remove a couple of his posts because the
Oh
Microsoft Azure, I think it is, which handles the back end of Gab. I'm not up on the technical phraseology, but they
yeah,
threatened to pull the plug on Gab unless those posts were removed.
yeah, I heard
So
about that.
I point this out to indicate that although the internet has permitted a kind of massive dissident popular mobilization, there's another line, and that tracks the increasing centralization of the web, meaning that the two are starting to come into conflict, which is what we're
Yeah.
seeing in the open now. So that's more of a background on these trends we're seeing.
Yeah, actually, I do find the centralization of power in the internet highly disturbing. Uh,
Mm.
the if I recall correctly, Obama wanted to give the reins of the internet over to the UN, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that sits right now, but I remember thinking to myself, good God, that's the worst possible thing that you could possibly do. And of course, Obama would freaking do that. Oh my God, I hate that guy sometimes. And it's like, dude, so you're going to hand over the internet, the control of the internet to the UN, which has the, what is it, the OIC or something like that? Or not the OIC, there's like a grouping of Middle Eastern countries that have a lot of power and that they always vote as a block, as a unit. And it's like, dude, you're going to hand over the internet to a bunch of people that are like literally anti-Western civilization. You fucking kidding me? I mean,
Yeah.
good God. All it takes is for a few people to get in the reins of power to just use the ban hammer and just boom, everyone. I mean, on the digital plane, it's memory hole status. It's not book burning. People always use that analogy, and I guess there's something to it. I guess, but it strikes me more as being like the memory hole from Orwell's 1984. It's just deleted, like it never existed. There is no ceremony. The book burning itself is a ceremony, and that's what's missing. There's no ceremony. It's worse than the book burning. At least with the book burning, you can look at it, you can see the spectacle and say to yourself, wow, that really sucks. You know, I've got such, rage feelings about this now. But when it's just arbitrarily deleted, it just goes and that's it. It's even worse, in my opinion. And that's what we're looking through right now. And I agree. There's a real hard conflict coming up, and one of the biggest issues is that we don't have power, so they can delete us, and there's nothing at the moment that we can do about it. They can literally just, if they wanted to stop this stream, they could do it. They could say, well, we're pushing the button. There goes the Lemurstream right now. Boom, gone. They could do it. That's big time freaking that. I find that disturbing.
Yeah, that's a rather stark way of putting it when you compare it to a book burning. And Michael Tracy was pointing out on Twitter that Jones had interviewed many public figures, and all that's been erased, gone.
Oh wait, which interviews by Alex Jones? You mean?
Yeah, this journalist Michael Tracy on Twitter was pointing out that there's all of those the records of the people that Alex Jones interviewed have been erased from the digital space. So
Yeah,
yeah, it goes to
yeah, they
your
can.
point of like it is exactly like a book burning. You're literally doing a 1984.
Yeah, this is why I like the phrase "memory hole" a little better, only because in terms of just technicality, I think it's more reflective of the situation.
Hmm.
But on a basic level, both are fundamentally similar. It's just that one has ceremony and the other does not have ceremony.
Yeah.
And I find the one without ceremony to be more distressing, to be perfectly
Hmm.
honest. But on a fundamental level, you are still dealing with the annihilation of information, and I don't care for that in the least. I mean, God, it makes me want to start getting like extra hard drives and backing things up or something. You know, I mean, it's just yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. You had some more points.
Yeah, the next one I think we already touched on. This it's my intuition that this is going to get worse, that it's in preparation for the next electoral cycle. The legislative elections are going to be the equivalent of a national election in the US, and there's no reason to suppose that if these people are in for a penny, they're not in for a pound. They're not going to use half measures.
Oh no, they're not in it for the pound either, man. They're in it for the whole goddamn economy.
Hmm. Yeah, and well, Jones shows they're pretty serious because he's a
Yeah.
major fish. He's not, Beast Wars 1488 on Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beast Wars.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on. We've got to we've got to become more serious and realize that, like you were saying earlier, that these people have most of the power and we have very little of it. Up until now, our strategy has been to play within the rules, and these are gradually tightening. Jack's cleaning up the playground. He's laying down new rules of behavior. Now, our game plan has to exceed finding ways of maximally exploiting the conditions of possibility set by Jack and his cronies. Um, this this is going to be essential because otherwise we're going to be in a constantly reactive state and we will stay powerless. So it goes. The reactions I've been seeing, even on the dissident right, have been somewhat disappointing because it shows you how deeply these people have been conditioned by the liberal hegemonic order. Deleuze would say that if ideas come from experience, then you have to look back at how your experience has been conditioned to understand the very way that you think, not just what you think, but the way you think. So he's taking Nietzsche a step further. Nietzsche wanted to transvaluate morality. Deleuze wants to transvaluate evaluation. In other words, we have to evaluate the way we evaluate. That this is critical because if our reactions are purely immediate, and I'm not saying they aren't necessary by any means, but they are not sufficient. If they're just immediate, then we're going to be trapped in the dialectical subsystem that keeps various pieces on the board in conflict in a way which perpetuates liberal power. So it's like, to put it crudely, it's like we're the monkey and we're jumping around through their hoops. And the people who are supposed to be protecting the monkeys, well, they're jumping too. When the left says jump, they say how high. So that's the first part of my next point. Any thoughts before we continue, Etche?
Basically, if they set the rules and we play by their rules, they win.
Mm.
That's more or less what you're saying.
Pretty much, yeah.
This comes from my anarchist days. I remember having the idea in my head that I don't like the game that's being played, and I don't think that we should be trying to think of ways to modify their rule set. We shouldn't be thinking of ways to modify their game. Yeah. We should be playing our own game. Excuse me, I just had a cookie like an idiot, sorry. We should be thinking about how to play our own game. That is to say, we should be inventing our own game. And the moment we invent our own game, the moment we start playing our own game, we win. That's it. The American Revolution was exactly that. The British Empire was the game of the Brits. And the colonists were like, we don't want to play that game anymore. And then the Brits, they were like, we're totally going to force you to play our game, and we're going to do so at gunpoint. To which the Americans said, fuck off, your game stinks. And so they fought over who's going to play whose game. And the Brits ultimately lost. And I know that there's a much more complex history, and I know that I'm simplifying it. I get it. But the point still stands that on a historical level, there was a formal break between the Americans and the Brits. That's really my main point. How it was accomplished is a separate issue, but they did want to play their own game, the Americans at the time. And I think that's the best possible solution. Deciding to play your own game and deciding that if you don't want to participate in their game, you're not going to participate in their game. And fundamentally, the radical left, they are all about forcing you to play their fucking game. Just think
Hmm.
about all of the what is it? All the speech codes that are going on now, and Antifa blaming all problems on white people and forcing whites to, cower, shame, and everything. So as long as we can, rather, as long as we play by their rules, and say, and of course, those in the dissident right, most nationalists would say, "Go fuck off. We're not interested in playing your stupid game." And I know that I'm in that boat as well. I forget that I'm 40 years old, and that for me, see, I grew up in the 1980s, and in the 1980s, I was a wallflower. I was very uninteresting. I was just some kid, doing whatever the hell I was doing, and no one cared about what I was doing, and that freed me up to do whatever the hell I felt like, and no one paid any mind to me whatsoever, because I was just some stupid white kid, and that was it. So my psychological context is that of a person who is not noteworthy in and of himself in terms of his identity. As for the left, they have created a situation where, and I'm 40, so psychologically, this is a radical departure from what I'm used to. The radical left has created a situation in which millennials and Gen Z especially are hyper aware of their identity as either whites or non-whites. And for me, it's just fucking crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And I think that the point here is that the left, they're forcing the game on everyone of pay attention to the identity and hate yourself for being a particular identity. Nationalists have no problem saying, I'm not going to play that game, but we need to expand that so that the rest of the population also says, your game stinks and we're not going to play that game. I've seen inroads within the general population, but it's got to be expanded, and it's got to be more than merely the psychology of saying you authoritarians are being assholes. I'm cursing again. I have to stop that. Sorry about that. Anyway, the people on the right, we're going to have to start not only creating a new game on just a pure psychological level, but also on a political and social infrastructure, societal, civilizational infrastructure level as well. Because if we can't provide cover for each other, if we can't protect each other, then we're going to lose by default. And right now we're in the problem of being so vulnerable that it's easy to simply take us out of social media, for example, and increasingly take us out of the ability to even feed ourselves and pay rent. So we're not merely in a one down position. I mean, one down means that you're not doing too bad. We're way below one down at the moment. It's not good.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah. I would emphasize that it's not just about rejecting the ideological frame which they're imposing on us, but to evaluate one's mode of evaluation is to actually get at the way and mode of your thinking itself, because that's been conditioned by the system as well. So if your
Yeah.
thinking follows systematic processes, it's going to produce systematic pro-system results, even if substantively and consciously you think that you are against the system.
Right. I do understand that. That's fine for our circles. I think that's much more of an aristocratic thing. What I mean by that is people who are directing or creating either culture or policies should be thinking in those terms, but that's not helpful to the average Joe who is, average IQ 100. He's not going to be thinking in those terms.
Mhm.
We need to
Perhaps,
have,
yeah,
uh,
perhaps not, but it should be the way that we're thinking, and then we
yeah,
should seek to use force multiplication by leading the conservative base against these people.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, I do agree that we do need to have, what is it? Meta analysis,
Hmm.
analysis of analysis. I do agree with that. And I mean, that's a large subject when you stop and think about it. So I'm not in a position to think about that right now. I'm still recovering from like the last couple of days right now. So I'm gonna go ahead
Fair
and yeah,
enough.
I'm gonna let that one go for the moment.
Okay, so moving on, if we start evaluating some of these modes of behavior, you see things like this degree of childishness, magical thinking, where I think in the writer's subconscious, there's still a strong belief that ideas change, they have the power to change reality itself. Like children believe this. Children think if they think about something hard enough, it'll happen. And on top of this, you have this social situation online where there's feedback loops that form because of the dopamine hits around the production of content, and that can lead to an entirely impotent circle because satisfaction is gained simply by interacting and consuming content, and then you get a dopamine hit, and then you make more content to, keep the habit going. And all we're doing is replicating decadent bourgeois patterns of consumption. So that that is something which needs to be addressed because we're playing big boy politics now. And we're starting to realize that if we're playing within the rules of the system, they can be altered on us at any time and we can be shut down. Now, one of the ways to get around this or to escape these mental patterns, I think, is to have a consciousness of the long term. And this is quite difficult to do because if you are a dopamine junkie, you want your results now, now, now. You want the shitlib triggered. You want, the funny meme. Okay, that kind of moment-to-moment mentality is not a viable way forward. As you pointed out, Etche, quite correctly, we're not just one down. We are almost totally bereft of any real political power, and only a limited metapolitical power. Our abilities don't go much further than agitation at the current stage. And when we tried to go beyond that, when we tried to coalesce, it all fell apart and we went into a period of abeyance. Now, a couple of examples of very long-term thinking, and they don't directly impinge on this matter, but they do demonstrate the point, is sites like Countercurrents and MPC. They've been around, I think, almost for a decade now, and they've cultivated over time an extremely high level of discourse, which has gradually attracted high IQ quality people who can start to put their minds to solving some of these problems. So they've built one of the first steps for us. And they only managed to do that by working away year after year on a much longer time scale than the news cycle of the current week or what have you. That's a long project, and the creators of those sites and the content which appears on them deserve a lot of credit for what they've done, because they've made conversations like this possible, where we're actually getting down to the nitty-gritty of what we need to do to move forward. And what we do need to do is to build capacity for complex engagement. The system is coming at us from all sides. It has full spectrum dominance. It can flank us. It can push us into binaries of control, where whatever direction we go in, we will be met by a dead end, because they will use that singular tactic or strategy and turn it back against ourselves. So if we talk in the public space and we build up a platform like Red Ice or even InfoWars, it can be shut down because it's centralized. So you speak up, you get shut down. You don't speak up, you get the agenda goes ahead unimpeded. If we build up more dimensions to our movement, more functions, these can be brought into coordination with one another in ways that multiply our force and permit us to avoid these binaries of control. So if our agitation is coordinated with what we're doing beneath the surface, it's going to be a lot more effective than just untargeted mass propaganda, which may no longer be possible given the non-permissive social media environment we are now entering. So that's the background to our mindset to solve this, I think. And more specifically, what would building this capacity look like in terms of the actual problem, the direct problem we face right now? So we want to solve the immediate problem, but we want to do so in a way which keeps the long term in mind. And I think the answer is relatively simple to say. However, it is going to take a lot of effort and a lot of cultural changes to enact. And it's this: you create fractal networks in the online space that manually spread our propaganda using coordinated metapolitical fire teams. That would be extremely hard for the system to shut down. Some of you who tuned in yesterday will recall my comments on this, giving illustrations. For instance, suppose you have a global opinions piece in the Washington Post that has a comment section. You would want a fire team in there pushing our propaganda, confronting the narrative presented in the opinion piece, upvoting each other, replying to people pushing the establishment narrative. All those kind of things are actually quite important because we know from studies that comment sections dramatically alter the perception of people reading a news article. Now, taken by itself, that perhaps is not going to incite a major metapolitical shift. But if these networks are grown far enough and wide enough and they become active enough, you will have the phenomenon of aggregate effect where many small metapolitical shifts at the local level add up to a significant one when taken in concert.
Yeah, I would also the word accretion comes to mind as well. It's almost like it solidifies. I mean, we're talking about the mental plane, but in some weird way, it almost becomes palpable. The way that Coca-Cola, with all of their advertisements and logos and whatnot everywhere, when you think of Coca-Cola, you almost get like a physical sensation when you think about the product. And that's kind of the direction that it should go. It should become such. I mean, in an ideal world, if the background chatter was so constant that it just seemed quite normal and bizarre if it was absent, that would be ideal. But anyway, I'm sorry, just random thought. I'm done.
No, that's a good point. These small changes that are built up over time, they add up to something big. And major brands invest huge amounts of money in building up a particular image meticulously, piece by piece. You know, Apple won't even let, I'm pretty sure, well, at least here, you're not allowed to have sale signs next to Apple products because that makes them look cheap and
Yeah.
they're not boutique or whatever anymore. They're not trendy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they're prepared to go to those levels, it shows what a high bar there is for us. And messing
Yeah.
around with individuated shitposting is just no longer going to cut it in the big boys' playground.
Yeah. This is actually one of the reasons why I'm trying to play clean in my streams as just a way of setting myself up psychologically for what I'm going to have to get through later on.
Hmm.
Uh, because I still very much want to get that. I mean, assuming that I can actually secure it, which I'm pretty sure I can, run for office and get the position and just have some kind of local authority. Uh, yeah, in some way, you kind of do have to groom yourself for it. And I think that there's a lot to be said for public image. There's a lot to be said for how you present to people who are not you.
Mm.
And the nice thing about some of the weird shit posting in the Great Meme War of 2016 was that it was full of energy and life and joy and mirth, and it was great. And as with anything, you go through a honeymoon phase, and then the marriage kicks in. And I think that we're moving way past the honeymoon phase, and the marriage now needs to kick in. And what I mean by that is marriage to the ideas. And the ideas are essentially that, yeah, we're totally looking at Western civilization being fundamentally in a context of collapse. And here in Los Angeles, it's highlighted all the time. I
Mm.
mean, it's in your face all the time. There's no way out of it. And we need to, yeah, I agree. We need to absolutely get serious. And I think amongst the things that we need to do in terms of getting serious is a real thought on what we do, how we present, and so on. And when people call me an optics cuck, I'm like, yeah, totally, I am. And the reason is because if you're going to play in the big leagues, you have no choice but to go pro. And going pro
Hmm.
means you wash your hair, you
Yeah.
know, you trim your beard, you polish your shoes,
In
you
your case,
curse.
put curlers in your hair as well, just looking at your avatar.
Yes, obviously, of course, because if I'm going to go outside, I want my golden locks to be flowing and beautiful. I want the wind to pick them up, and everyone must notice and say, gosh, Eke's hair is divine. How luxuriant his coiffure is. So yeah, that's 100% the direction that I want to go.
Damn,
So
son, you even have a rare word for it.
yeah, this is what you got to do, man. You got to get that
Hmm.
sweater vest ready, man.
Yeah, yeah. No, and it's again, it's not, I'm just not limiting this to brand, but power machinations and influence in general. I mean, there are multiple vectors of influence. So they all have to be addressed, and they have to be addressed in such a way that there's no longer singular centralized targets for the establishment to take out. So, for instance, if you imagine red ice, MPC, countercurrents, any major figure on Twitter, and you draw connections between them and the people they're interacting with, you'd see a few lines emanating from them, but there'd be a whole mass of lines converging on their platform and their message. That allows the establishment to chop things off at the head. We have to switch to a far more networked model of operations, and in order to do that, we've got to enact cultural change within our milieu. Because right now, we still have the legacy of the 4chan meme troll culture, which has its place and still has its place, but it's insufficient if we want to move beyond the stage of agitation and toward coalescence and more quality informal connections that, according to the sociological theory, are the basis of a healthy social movement.
Yeah, I actually do agree with that. Because the you can almost look at it from the standpoint of there's a problem, and when a problem is noticed by a grouping of people, they will all look at the problem, and then they'll all start to talk about the problem. And if the problem persists, they'll try to deal with the problem largely individually.
Mm.
And that's kind of the stage that we're at right now. The problem is persisting, and people are trying to work on it individually. But of course, as we all know, many hands make light work.
Mhm.
So the issue is the problem is so gargantuan that
Mhm.
it requires institutional solutions, and we don't in any way have that. And I think that okay, so like a month ago, I was talking to this guy. I can't remember his name. He was some boomer on the Luke Ford stream, and he was shitting on me for talking about solutions. This moved into dissident rights stuff or whatever, and just the general problems in society. And I was talking about how my solutions are quite tepid, but at least there's something. I like to engage in media, and that's about as far as it goes for me. Obviously, ooh, a sticker campaign, wow, uh, you know, great. I do my streams in my cute little short film, hurrah, hurrah. But and running for office, this is all tiny stuff, but I think that it's the correct direction in as much as it's the single step toward uh, working within groups instead of just doing it on your own. Just as you're mentioning with 4chan, it's like, yeah, I could totally just sit in the background on Twitter and just go to all the blue check marks and just shitpost normally the way that it
Mm.
would have been highly effective back in mid 2016. Um, for one thing, it's decreasingly effective, especially now that everyone's getting banned for everything. So that's first off. And then second off, well, yeah, but the whole reason that we're getting banned for everything is because they control all the institutions. So we have to start moving towards thinking in terms of larger than simply one retard at a keyboard saying, LOL, you're dumb. We have to move
Mm.
past that. And when that one guy, the boomer, he was saying something about how he thinks that if you can change the culture, the problems will tend to solve themselves. On a certain level, I concur, but on another level, I completely disagree, and vehemently so. And the problem with his line of thinking is that it's completely hands off, and it strikes me as being very boomer like in that regard. For some reason, the boomers had this idea of letting go and experiencing things or whatever. You can hear Terence McKenna echo this in some of his trialogues, where he was saying something about, of course, the whole DMT experience in his view was like the height of experiencing reality or whatever, moving closer to the Godhead or something. And for the boomer mindset, getting as close as possible to God apparently resulted in the self-dribbling jeweled basketballs, the machine elves, telling him to experience this. I mean, that's very close to don't do anything.
Mm.
Just sit there and let things happen around you. That's fucking retarded, dude. We should not be in that mindset. And that's where now, of course, there's a counterpoint to that, which is that the machine elves also told him to speak, and every time he would speak, a new machine elf would generate. And I thought that was a lovely metaphor for the generation of reality and culture and life and light through communication. There is something to be said for communication. In some sense, is our sense of reality. So one of the reasons that I'm so interested in narratives is because we have a tendency to align our lives with the narrative that we have in our heads. Anyway, the coming all the way back. Oh gosh, there was an earlier point. Son of a, I got lost in some other bullcrap. Oh yeah, that's right. We need to move into direct intentionality and not being
Mm.
passive. And part of the intentionality that I think we should start really embracing is working together with other people. We just have to do it. And even though I'm a terrible example because I am hyper individualistic and I know it, I'm trying to get out of that. I'm trying to break through that so that I make a point of talking to people, interacting, helping, and so on. And I'm doing this consciously, even though it's not native to me. I've been a kind of a hermit my whole life, but I kind of feel like, dude, we got to do this. This is for the greater good. So, you just have to. That's just all there is to it. We have to start doing it.
Yeah, we are the cavalry, and I mean, I couldn't have put it better myself. We've got to make those changes, and pretty much most of what I'm trying to do here with these strategic lemur streams is to at least create the preconditions for the coordination that needs to take place at the level of praxis. You were talking earlier about that ideas need to be married to reality. And I would say that the way that an idea is married to reality is praxis. In other words, the rubber has to meet the road. You've got to say, okay, these ideas are all very fine, but what is the explicit particular sequence which leads us from where we are now to where the telicity of the idea will take us? What's in other words, we've got to create the conduit for the telos of the idea.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually a great, yeah, because one of the minor issues I'm having with my short film project is that I don't have a template for for decision trees on what to do and why to do them, or what decision trees on what actions to perform, and why I would or would not want to perform certain kinds of actions. Because in a nutshell, I have to, when you think about the actual the production itself, not post production, which is what a lot of people well, whatever. Anyway, the production itself just means that you have to have a camera, actors, makeup, food, props, and costumes, all at one location, all of it paid for, and everyone agreeing to do the kinds of behavior patterns that are necessary to get usable footage. Oh yeah, and sound equipment, because that's important too. And the issue with that is that, oh my God, like you have to, there's so much planning that goes into that. It's ridiculous. And I've never done it before. So I'm having to go through, and because I know a lot of like weird technical stuff in terms of when you're actually on set, but that has nothing to do with pre-production. And I feel like the larger pattern with the dissident right, we're in a similar position in as much as, okay, we know that we're powerless. We know that we need to gain power, but what are the actual steps that we need to accomplish in order to gain some power so that we're not completely vulnerable? And that's a major issue because like the closest we've come, I think, is what, like Pat Little. He had his campaign.
Well, I'd say that's going backwards, in fact.
Yeah, Faith Goldie, she's got her campaign in Toronto. She's also going to lose.
Don't forget to donate, guys. Don't forget.
Yeah, I mean, I donate, or I don't donate, but I mean, I retweet all of her tweets. Yeah, I always had positive comments for supporting. Well, I guess I didn't have positive comments for supporting Pat Little, but I always indicated that I was going to vote for him. Because he's at least out there and doing something, which is huge. People need to get into that mindset.
Well, he's a good troll. I'll give him that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a good start.
But again, it comes back to that kind of the content jerk-off cycle. Like it titillates the Spurglords that inhabit Torber's purgatory when he runs around with his sign. They get a rush from that. Doesn't change anything in reality.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's another criticism one could easily make of Richard Spencer. More so than slightly than Amren. American Renaissance, they at the very least they hold conferences and they get people talking, but even that is much more on the meta level, and it's not on the ground level. It's not in the nuts and bolts application of policies to human lives, and that's where we need to go. And the dealing in culture is great for moving people mentally, psychologically into the mindset of doing things like real world action and activities. For want of a better word, propaganda, basically. Yeah, sure, it serves its purpose, but even propaganda should be in some relative to where we are right now, should be seen as in service to moving toward policy or moving toward a safe society, which we don't have right now. And one could argue that we are moving toward a less safe society with regards to treatment of whites, obviously.
Mm,
Uh, I mean, I do understand that within the white countries, intra-white within white to white crime is very, very, very low, and it's been decreasing, and I do understand that. But crime against whites, it's certainly increasing in South Africa. That's for goddamn sure. It's definitely increasing in Europe, and I think it's going to increase in America as well. And I don't like that. We need to be thinking in terms of moving towards a safer society. And I think that one of the vectors, I like that word vector. That's a fun word to say. One of the vectors that one might want to consider is creating a society where whites are safe from attacks from non-whites. That I think is going to become increasingly important, obviously in South Africa and clearly in Europe as well. What with the now near weekly uh, jihad attacks.
mm.
So these
It can't
anyway.
be it can't be overemphasized though that without organization, without leadership, even the worst systematic conditions which push people towards certain ideas will not lead to a resolution of the problem because you need the masses never act, so you need people who are capable of actually making decisions and having others follow them. And
Yeah,
that's a very difficult political technology for us because we can't access formal command and control hierarchies. And secondly, in our modern, doped up, mass consumerist, atomized society, many people, including ourselves to a degree, because of the deep encoding by this kind of milieu and liberal order, have fallen into a behavioral sink that John C. Calhoun identified in his studies of mice and rat population when they were
yeah,
um, overstimulated and overscaled, and the numbers exceeded conceptual space.
yeah. Actually, I think that there's Charlene is saying this is a black pill stream. That's funny. In some sense, he's kind of right. There's
She, what's your pronouns there,
whoa
AJ?
there, buddy. Whoa,
The,
whoa. Okay, all right.
the stream respects Charlene's pronoun.
Okay, all right. Very, very
Okay.
good. Can my pronoun be His Majesty? That'd be freaking cool. Okay. Anyway, um, I think that there is a silver lining, which is that, and this is very bleak in a way. So stay with me for a moment on this. I get it, but with a collapse of Western civilization, there will necessarily be a collapse of the non-white population, the parasitic non-white population. We pay for their benefits. We pay for Africa to be alive,
Yeah.
and once we go away, they will not be able to maintain their own numbers, which means they go away too. And
Mhm.
I fully understand that this is that's a very, very bleak thought, and I get it. But uh, in some way, the liberals, by slitting their own throats and sadly our throats as well, at the very least, no one will be around to feed their attack dogs. So for those who survive, uh, they they will have a lot of empty space to move into.
Yeah, potentially.
Again,
Potentially.
that's a very bleak way of looking at it, but
Mhm.
you know,
Well, it's only
anyway,
bleak if we don't take these actions. I think one of the reasons people get blackpilled is because they take the system's spectacle at face value, and this is the laudatory monologue the system performs for its own glory, and they see this
Mm.
closing in around them, and it has that inevitability to it, and people who can't see a way out will lose hope. Now, I think that we've got a lot of tough work to do. There's It's going to be a long slog, but from my perspective, I can see the sequences of interactions and causal chains that hold the spectacle, that hold things together behind the spectacle, and I can see if we move input A, we will get output B, and then we move B and we will get C, and gradually we can start to alter these underlying conditions, and with it restore the possibility of a new order.
Yeah, I think that's it's a great idea, and the only thing that I can think is there does need to, sadly, that one boomer uh, haunts me sometimes. Once these psychological conditions are amenable to people basically deciding to not uh, die, whites in this case, once they have the psychological uh, um, allowance. What is it when you indicate approval of something? Permission? Permission. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Once people have permission to survive, there's a lot of like almost basic physiological reflex actions that just kick in immediately. And it seems as though Western civilization, whites, we've lost our will to live or to survive. It's really, really weird. And I think the movement toward life needs to be embraced before we can do a lot of these larger policy programs. Because you can talk about it, you can say we need to survive or we need to look out for our own or whatever, and you will immediately get shouted down. You will get shunned, not merely by self-loathing leftists. You'll also get shouted down by cucks, conservative cucks, who will go on and on and on about how, I don't see color. We all bleed red, white, and blue, and all that good jazz.
Oh,
And
that's all very true, but again, they're kind of effects, and we've got to look at the causes behind those things. To return to your point a little earlier, where you gave the illustration of the complexity of a cinematic production and how you had to have everything in a sequence.
yeah,
Um, I had a similar discussion with Sin on this, which is very productive. I think some of it was offline, but uh, what we were talking about is this necessity of moving from A to B before
yeah,
you think about A to Z, or even B to C. One of the ways, and this is a fine psychological point, but one of the ways that kind of subconscious cuckery happens even in the dissident right is that whereas the establishmentarian conservative will cuck on ideas, the dissident rightist, having had his mode of thought codified by the liberal state and unaware that his resistance is still in part informed by the very system he is striving against, what he will do is he will cuck on the sequence. So I've been in multiple chats today and talking to people where they'll say in relation to this InfoWars situation, what we need to do is we need to move from D to E and from E to F, and we'll fight these people when we take those actions. And I say, well, hang on, wait a minute. We've got to do the A to B jump first. Thanks very much. Because unless you have the preconditions in place for these actions, they won't take place.
yeah.
Now, why do people do this if they know that there should be a sequence? And I think it's because if you break the sequence at any point, it excuses you from responsibility and of actual serious action outside of magical thinking. So
Yeah, yeah.
You are saying in a well, it's like Greg Johnson says in one of his articles. If people who think they can't win will try and lose on their own terms. So you always lose by fighting for these by dying, not dying on the wrong hill, but selecting a hill that's way too far ahead of you to even think about fighting on.
Yeah, actually, that's funny because that's literally what I did when I was playing Risk with Frame Game Radio. I knew that I was going to lose because I just didn't have the power to do anything about it. And so, in one of the early streams, I took him out. I was just like, "No, I'm not going to lose to Frame Game 3 games in a row." So basically, I took him out, knowing that that would lay the groundwork for another player to take him out. Isn't that terrible? But anyway, it just reminds me of the idea of the 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 noble loss. And I think that there's a lot of people. I think some of the Spurg lords, one of the reasons that they spurg out is because they are kind of black pilled, and they're like, "Well, I'm going to lose anyway, so fuck it. I'm going to call everyone
Yeah.
whatever name I want, and I'm going to talk about this, that, and the other thing, and alienate myself from everyone, and then say that I did something."
Mm,
And it's like, well, that's not. You
yeah.
could spend the same energy doing something positive. If you're going to expend the energy, spend that energy on something positive. Don't spend it on something negative.
Mm, for sure. Yeah, I want to link this point as well about the how critical it is to move from A to B to my previous point where I talked about building capacity over the long term and not just being a reactionary within the context of the immediate situation. So when things like this happen, sure, we should make adjustments. You know, for instance, I delete or unlist these streams after we've had them to keep them nomadic and to prevent a strategic center of gravity. Um, well, that's probably a little bit too much for a tiny channel like mine, but at least, you know, to remove a target for the system. So we do make those alterations in the moment, but when things like this happen, we should be doubling down on the long-term vision because that is the only way we will ever seize the initiative, and that requires people with high moral character and high energy and an ability to slog on and do things without immediate reward, like I gave in my illustrations of, say, you know, countercurrents and MPC, which are a decade-long project.
I just realized you were prompting me to talk. I'm sorry. I just had a bite of banana like an idiot. I keep doing that. Sorry, man.
I think this is 3 strikes now, Eche.
I know, this is awful.
That's it. That's it. You've had your three.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
My patience has its limits, Eche.
Oh no. I like how you say that all calm. All right. Anyway, yeah, I think the whole idea with going from A to B as a major first step, huge. I think one of the problems is that we don't know what that A to B even looks like on a larger level. Like, who knows? Do you have
Um,
any ideas?
well, I think that you were touching on them earlier when you were talking about the need to begin coordinating and, or the way I'd put it, that we have to start developing networks and first of all units within those networks and then more broadly coordinating them. That's the basis of all possible future action. That's the wheels on the car we're building.
All right, all right. Fair enough, fair enough. Okay, um, so what I'm hearing is this more or less is a repetition or a reinforcement of something that Frame Game Radio was talking about, which is we need to have institutions. Um, Amren is a good start. Countercurrents is a good start. Countercurrents is more, what is it, essay based. So they don't do physical meetings, but it's still something. It's still, it's people agreeing to go to a place, even though it's a digital place. It's still something. I think that we need to, yeah, I think the whole idea of like right wing bowling night, we got it. We just have to do something, and I think that that's the correct direction for an initial. And I think it might be a good idea to just set a goal and just say, look, we're gonna agree to meet physically at a place and just and maybe not even chit chat about politics.
Yeah.
Maybe just to start, just be like, look, we're gonna play freaking Jenga. Because no matter what happens, everyone knows how to play fucking Jenga. We may not be solving the world's problems, but at least we can hang out. We can play Jenga later on when one of us runs for office, or when one of us has some kind of, I don't know, like a march that they want to go on and they need other people to be there. Or maybe they're going to go to city council, or maybe they're going, and Antifa will be there and they're going to need protection. And then some of the people can go there and help out with that, or whatever.
Yeah.
Pick something.
You're building
But
social capital.
precisely by simply going to a location and saying, hey guys, we're playing freaking Jenga. And then someone's like, well, I don't like Jenga. We'll play Sorry. Okay, fine. We'll play some Jenga, then we'll play some Sorry, and we're going to have a good time. No matter what happens, you at the very least have the ability to say, look, we agreed to go to a location. We now know who we are. We had an okay time too. It was great. We even had cake and cookies, and it was beautiful. And then by doing that on a consistent basis, you create real relationships. And there's something that I remember thinking about, which is that we have a tendency to work with repetition. We learn through repetition more than anything else, and we tend to build relationships based on repeated interactions. There is a beautiful moment in the movie Ghost World from 2001, I want to say. That was one of Scarlett Johansson's very first movie roles, just so everyone understands exactly how old I am anyway. There's a beautiful moment in the movie Ghost World where the two girls, it's these two high school girls, they're just graduating high school, and they're at, I think it's like the scene, like the party for the very end of the school year or something like that, so indicating that like it's a graduation party. And they see this guy in the middle of the party. They see this guy who's just kind of a nerd, just kind of a dork. And one of the girls says, we're never going to see that guy ever again for our whole life. And that actually makes one of the girls really, really sad. And even though he's a dork and they don't really care for him too much, there is a sense of familiarity. And the reason that sense of familiarity was there was because they were simply around the guy for like 4 freaking years. And that's just what they grew up with. And this is kind of the basis that I'm thinking of when I consider things like right-wing bowling squads. It's actually about going to the same location multiple times, not merely multiple times, but habitually. For example, the reason that I do my streams every night at 11 p.m. without fail is actually as reference to that exact point, which is that through repetition and through people going to the same place repeatedly, relationships tend to build. You'll note that there are people that are interacting within the chats that have nothing to do with me at all. And I think that's great. I think that's fantastic, because what's slowly being created is the tiniest grain, the seed of community. Now, of course, within the context of what, a YouTube channel, like, all right, it's not the biggest thing in the world. It's not exactly groundbreaking, but as far as I'm concerned, it's still freaking cool. And I think that it would be great to move from the from digital space to IRL. And the moment we do that, we are a single step closer to gaining real political power. And I think that the way to think about that is genuinely through repeated interactions. So it should be monthly, so that every month, like the first here in Venice Beach, there's this concept called First Friday, and First Friday is everyone gets their food trucks for whatever reason, and they descend on Abbot Kinney. And First Friday, every month, there's no parking, but it looks like a giant street party. And I don't care for it, but I know a lot of other people do care for it. And it gets business going, for the food trucks anyway. The local businesses have kind of a love-hate relationship with it. But anyway, the
Yeah.
point is still that it creates an event that everyone recognizes and everyone goes to. That's the point. And when you do that
Mm.
enough times with the same group of people, you build real relationships.
Yeah. It's that quotidian element to it. It's a very that's a very good observation you're making there, because what we're getting into there is granular level sociology, which is the kind of insight we need to build extremely strong networks. In my conception, modern technocratic society is mostly competition between networks, and thus it's social it's social Darwinism in a way. The stronger your network is, the stronger the quality of the connections and the people being connected, the more likely it is to achieve dominance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that those observations about building these kind of micro communities leads me into my penultimate point here, and that is, well, I return to the Deleuzian idea, and I know people probably get tired of it, but it's my high horse, and I'll thrash it if I want. Um, yeah, Deleuze roots ideas in experience, and in his view, the flux of experience is the energy core which powers life, and with it, ideas. In other words, ideas are an extension of experience. Now, that means that when we are sequencing and structuring our interactions, we have to be doing it in such a way that they both cohere us as a group and lead to the praxis of our ideas in the real world. So there's until recently there's a couple of discourses on this in the alt right, or what was the alt right, and one of them says that we shouldn't we should do what the people like, and this is a point Alinsky makes. And of course, some people have this Alinsky worship mentality as if he's the secret source of the left-wing success. But in fact, a lot of Alinsky isn't directly applicable, because he's working with the knowledge that the commanding heights of the society are largely favorable. We don't have that. And so when Alinsky says, like, we should just do what the people like and let them have at it, he can afford that kind of unstructured and uncoordinated agitation. Now, certainly, if we take those ideas and use them to agitate, we'll achieve some success, but it will not be a sufficient level of success to move our ideas and the movement forward. The other um, argument I see is that we don't want to be moral fags. We don't want to be stodgy and dry and just very boring and sort of uptight. Now, this is also has a truth to it as well. So it seems to me that we've got to, the key here is to stop seeing these behaviors as ends in themselves, but rather as a process which can be located within a broader goal, and that's Deleuze's idea of the energy of experience, right? So whenever we're engaging in humor, in bants, or even in intellectual discourse, that's all a it's like a power cell that can move us in the right direction if it is harnessed properly. However, if we fail to harness, what you will get is the content jerk-off cycle. You will get consumption patterns re-emerging and people satiating their desire for change with the simulacrum of the real.
Are you telling me that I should stop streaming?
No, in fact, I think your streams are great. They're like a Schelling point, but
I'm
um,
joking. I'm kidding.
yeah, you get me with that very even tone of yours sometimes,
Yeah,
AJ.
that's just funny because,
I guess you got me back.
well, it is funny though because you're like, well, we need to start moving away from just
No,
leaning
but
on
I
the
actually
content.
think that your streams are an example of where you're actually cohering um, experience and discourse, and out of that flux is emerging connections which are talking about praxis and beginning um, to actually
Oh
practice
yeah,
praxis, although that's kind of a tautology.
yeah, yeah. I do flatter myself that now and again I broach I move toward uh, something better than merely shit posting on 4chan with these little streams. So I
Hmm.
do, yeah, yeah, I actually do enjoy it, and I do regard it as being more than mere content creation. And by content creation, I only refer to just sights and sounds being uploaded onto YouTube. I mean, in some sense, I could be spending the exact same time, in some sense, not in some sense, completely literally. I could be spending the exact same time uploading videos about, and I was talking about them earlier, like makeup tutorials or something. Like I could get huge viewership if I was only uploading videos of like cats sleeping or of puppies chasing things. And that'd be great. You know, I'm pretty sure that I could actually make a career out of that if I really wanted to. But this is my little pet thing, and every so often I do get the tiny little comment here and there where someone. I just get the impression that one or two people are inspired to do something more
Mm.
than just sit around and get all upset. You know, you watch some of these some YouTube channels, and you know, not that I'm saying, you know, wow, okay, I'm so good. No self back patting on my part. You know, quite the opposite. But there are there's some YouTube channels where you just see these guys. They're just such Debbie Downers, and then you can just tell that they're so black pilled and so bleak. You know, it's like, well, but they're not doing much beyond these videos. And then once you're done watching them, you're not really inspired to go and do anything. And it's like, well, that's kind of lame. We need to be going in the exact opposite direction. We need to be doing something, anything. And yeah, I do like that there are a couple of people here and there that I've spotted where, yeah, they're doing stuff. That's great. That's fantastic. And I think that the more, you know, just on a general level, if you build it, they will come. If you do a thing, someone will notice and they'll like it. There's a market for just about everything you can think of. And just by doing a thing, someone's going to pay attention, someone's going to notice. So I think that, yeah, I just, now I'm okay. I just realized it's like 1:10 in the morning where I am. So my mind just went foggy right now. My apologies. But yeah, movement towards just action in general, and especially with a focus of positive actions that yield real world results. I genuinely think that needs to be our focus. And I thank you for this sort of tiny pat on the head of saying, yay, okay, you did something worthy. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And these kind of second and third order effects are exactly what we need to be concentrating on and are in themselves an example of force multiplication. And we need to multiply all the force we've got.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that, yeah, sorry, did you have a comment?
Oh no, that was it. Just yeah, I totally agree. The more we help each other and reinforce each other, the better off we are. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so that pretty much brings me to my concluding remarks that I've got noted down here. Um, and that's quite simply this. If we can't overcome the weapons which are used against us, we will disappear. And I'm quoting Bowden here. These are the facts, and therefore we have to do so in our own minds. I would add to that that it's the meeting of the minds, that intersubjectivity, the experience which flows from that, structured in the correct manner, which will allow us to embark on the gradual, step by step, A to B changes that will build our capacity over the long term to fight for our ideas and our civilization.
Right on. Right on. I especially like the idea of focusing on reality uh, and thinking about what steps you can take within your actual real world context, like dealing in real, like actual what goals can I physically accomplish? What can I physically do? So that when I'm done, I have something that I can point to and look at physically and just say, look, I totally did that thing. I think that's a great direction to move. I
Mm-hmm.
really do.
Yeah, well, it looks like some of the Brains Trust want to come on, Etche. So, what do you say we send out a few links?
Please, by all means, yes. I'm going to be getting a little bit, even though I slept all day, I can tell that my mind is starting to get a bit foggy. So I'm very happy to have someone else to take some of the attention off of my what will become increasingly inane remarks.
Well, you're going to have to issue a few inane remarks for the next few moments while I just get these emails out, all right?
Okay, that's fine. I'm okay with that. Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and check the chat, actually. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Hey, guys. What's happening, boss? As General. What do we got here? There are a couple of ads like super way up at the top, but they're all gone now. No, the chat cycled through. I'm going to pop out the chat. And we're going to see what's going down in the chat with the pop out. Okay, where are we? There we are. All right, let's see here. John Harris says, if you build it, they will come. That's right, man. Build the wall. That's all we got to do. We just got to keep moving forward, man. That's it. And let's see here. Prim. I assume that means anarcho-primitivism. And that's right. Somebody mentioned much earlier, what would Eke be like in an Anprim society or civilization? I would die, actually, unfortunately. I have a medical condition that is such that it requires that I actually have like not constant medical attention, but near constant medical attention. So, amongst the reasons that I don't want Western civilization to go full collapse, like full zombie apocalypse, is because people like me would die. In all of those zombie apocalypse movies, they never. Okay, there's one exception. There's one exception. In the television show The Walking Dead, there was one character that had diabetes, and she had to carry around a cooler with insulin shots so that she could be alive. And this is a great example of the problems with moving back into anarcho-primitivism, which is that there are a crapload of people that will simply die. And
Me
even
too.
though there's an argument for the, what is it? Let the chaff go. I get it. I understand that from like a super hard, evolutionary perspective, I can't get behind that for a multitude of reasons, amongst which is, well, for one thing, I would be one of the people to die. And the other is that there have been a lot of like really sickly people in the world that have added to our civilization. So I think that it's not proper to say only the physically fit must survive. I think there's a lot to be said for the mental plane. Okay, you were saying something, John Harris. My apologies.
Oh, I was just trolling. I would say, yeah, I'd die too, because I'm not like a Bronze Age pervert ready to go into the wilderness, you know?
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
a PSA, we are now entering the big boy phase of this stream. All right. You have to have at least 3 on for it to be a big boy stream.
Oh, okay.
We're now entering big boy status.
Big sips, big boys.
Big sips for big boys. I
That's
kind
the
of have to
one.
be quiet. Yeah, I kind of have to be quiet today, but I just wanted to come on and do a few bants. I don't really have much serious content for today, honestly.
No, it's fine. It's completely. Well, I think it's fine anyway.
Are you suggesting you're going to bring down the level of discourse on this stream, John?
Possibly.
Are we not raising the discourse here?
Yeah. Well, we should be. I mean, compared to what else is like out there, like
I love it.
all these like fashy streams and whatnot, and they're really high level discourse, you know. So the Lemurstream is pretty low compared to that.
Ooh.
Hey there, Jacob.
Oh, Jacob is a big boy. I can't shitpost now.
4 big boys
I like
all together.
shitposting. It's my favorite. Hello, I think this is the first time we're actually talking in person. Okay,
Hi, buddy. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you? And hello,
Yeah.
the other Jays.
I'm doing great, man.
Oh, just got out of working for, APAC, just retiring from a long day of working for, Mossad and all of those agencies that I work for.
Let me just
You
go
or
ahead and say,
Echo?
I'm jealous,
me
John,
and
because
Eke.
Okay.
you got a paycheck, buddy. You're doing great.
Well, I'm also paid by the Kremlin too, so.
Ah, you lucky son of a gun, man. You could be like a triple spy, triple agent, man.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So, what are we going to talk about today, big boys? Talk about some metaphysics.
I was told the topic was maybe going to be Alex Jones and the deplatforming, unless I'm derailing right now because that's already happened.
Yeah, we just sort of got through talking about that.
Okay,
give us your thoughts, Jacob. Anyway, off the cuff.
Yeah.
I got a few points. So maybe it's tedious for some, but it's kind of just my default way of I like to try and engage in several levels of maybe conspiratorial thinking, and so I like to analyze things like what do the normies observe, what are the hardline conspiratorials, and then what are the people who are maybe more cognizant of the inner workings of some government/shadow government. But 2 points that I had mental noted down was I guess the first one is something I saw today, and I think it's like Alex Jones stated himself: 6 million additional subscribers. Now, maybe I heard that like this is just a meme I saw, but I'm pretty sure he has gained subscribers for his website or something along those lines. I don't know if it was 6 million. I thought it was 2 million, but I know 6 million is a special number. But maybe this was just a meme. But does anybody know the number of subscribers gained by Alex Jones through this ordeal?
Well, that's what he said. He had 2.5 million on YouTube before he got showed. So, I'm not supposed to use that word. Before he got shut down. And basically, yeah, he said he got 6 million subscribers. I kind of doubt that a lot, but I'm sure he got some.
Yeah, I tend to think that he's enjoying his extra 15 minutes of fame right now, so he's getting a boost in viewership. But the question is whether that can be retained if he's booted off the main parts of the public spaces, and Paul Joseph Watson shelling that InfoWars is just winning so big, bro, isn't going to cut it in the long term.
Well, yeah, also they're just a bunch of paranoid conspiracy theorist freaks. Like, that's a problem too, right? I mean, we can't have our major, how clown world is it that our biggest platform is like a guy who's like nuts, who pushes like conspiracies about the Chinese communists shutting him down when it's like clearly like blue check mark faggots. like doing it. Sorry
Well,
for the language, but it's
that's
true.
kind of what I'm bringing attention to, is this idea that obviously if you come at it from maybe more of an analytical perspective, it's showing that is, like, first we're taking this on good faith. We're saying Alex Jones is just an actual guy. Obviously that Alex Jones persona is an act. He's not that crazy, right? He's a normal person. Just so, like, I think that, well, given this mindset or this line of thinking, we're thinking this guy puts on a persona called Alex Jones, goes onto a radio show and talks about stuff, sells a bunch of merchandise to people who are afraid for the future, sells kind of fear porn in a way, but also this shows us the mindset of a lot of that type of people. So the people who are unhappy with the current paradigm of the United States, they think along those lines, or they're susceptible to that thinking. They don't need much more than it's Chinese communists, or it's all about freedom and stuff like that. So even though he is kind of a ridiculous thing, if we take him at face value and say maybe he does actually empathize with those people, but whatever it is, he's fulfilling a niche, and that attracts a much larger audience than kind of like a really stale conversation like this or other more
Right.
high. Yeah.
But what I was going to say is that, is there a way for us to attract an audience like Alex Jones has without being like crazy conspiracy theorists and like all of the bad stuff that he has, you know? Because like part of the reason why he's getting shut down is because he made these like crazy conspiracies up about Sandy Hook. I mean, there might be some validity to them if you look into them or whatever, but like the way he like kind of just goes on and on about these like minute small things. I mean, he's setting himself up for getting shut down by big boy censors. So,
the establishment didn't care, though, when he was just ranting about the Illuminati and FEMA death camps. The only reason he's being targeted now, why he's being told to pay his accounts, is because he became a vector of mobilization for Trump.
Right. Which is what I was going to say, is that since he became a vector of mobilization for Trump, like all of his crazy conspiracy theories came up in the past. And so if you have people who have big audiences but like have crazy content and like wild stuff going on, like a couple of years ago, that can easily be brought up again, and you're screwed basically, unless you build your own platform or something like that, which actually Vox Day was talking about. That's interesting stuff. But sorry, Jacob, go ahead.
I was just saying, so the reason why, I guess this initial statement when I said he's gained from this happenings is more of a statement that is stating whatever, let's say there was I haven't actually investigated what happened. I've obviously heard the peripheries of it, but whatever happened by this statement, I've gained 6 million, which is tripling or quadrupling his actual number. This is a pro for him. So censorship often, as we've seen, I think with Milo Yiannopoulos and stuff like that, let's say I'm using like bunny fingers here, inverted commas, the censorers coming down on people, typically like the Streisand effect, correct? Like,
well, I would hope so, but I hope that's not just like our echo chamber that's like saying that's true and it's not actually true. That's what I fear, is like we're just like shouting into a chamber basically, and like we aren't actually improving. Like I would have to take a serious look at the like data analytics and stuff like that to make sure that that's actually true, that Alex Jones is getting more viewership. You might be able to check like the Alexa ratings.
But why is that a positive assertion for you if Alex Jones is benefiting from this? This would to me lead to the opposite. If the powers to be are censoring Alex Jones and it improves him, that means they want to encourage more people to go down the so I would take it in a completely different angle. Again, this is
it's like a
if this is tedious for
engineering.
people, I'm gonna bring things that are pretty much saying like Alex Jones is a shill, which I think this is just this idea. This isn't my personal opinion. I'm just saying under this line of thinking, if he benefits from the action, it's not saying this is a good thing for the people who are on the dissident right. It's saying this is a bad sign because Alex Jones is in cahoots or they want him to succeed at the very least, and he's taking a mass amount of eyes away from potentially what are real issues.
Right, and that's what I was thinking about when they kind of basically all announced it at once, because Millennial Woes made this point that he said basically like how it happened on the alternative right sphere is people would go down one by one, and so you couldn't like really say anything about it, and it would be on various different platforms at different times, and it was like a slow cleansing basically of the content. Whereas with Alex Jones, he's so big that everyone banning him at once is clearly meant to make a spectacle. And you could argue, like you said, it's meant to drive attention towards the his sort of sphere. But
that's just taking for granted that it actually did increase his viewership. If that didn't happen, then potentially there's a whole other basket of analysis.
Well, I think that the idea of either increasing or decreasing his subscriber count was not the point of the mass ban. I genuinely think that the people on those platforms, they are ideologically consistent with one another, and they simply wanted to ensure that his ability to reach people was going to be diminished. I think that's the only thing, and I think that it backfired on them. I honestly, that's the story that I believe, because I don't have any reason not to believe it. That the radical left, they are interested in silencing all dissenting opinions. So this seems very consistent with a grouping of people that are like, yeah, we hate him. He's a Nazi. Let's silence him. And then they did it.
Sorry. I was going to say, why do you think Twitter didn't ban him then?
Well, Jack was mentioning that Alex Jones did not violate any of Twitter's terms and services. So it seems as though Jack is the, ironically, the dissenting voice. Interestingly, many people on the radical left, they were really pissed off at Jack. If you go back and look at some of the comments, I mean, he spent a bunch of tweets. I think he uploaded like, I don't recall the number, but it was in excess of 6 or 7 really long tweets explaining his position. And every one of them, they were the radical left. They were shrill and they were shrieking about how terrible it is that Jack is tacitly endorsing a neo-Nazi or something. Well, so the impression that I get is that Jack is the one guy that's sticking to principles.
Right. I don't think it's like that, honestly. I think these people are more nefarious. I think they might have left him on, like Jacob said, like if they're trying to actually control his viewership, they might have left him on Twitter so he has like at least one outlet to say, like, scream to people, I've been censored, blah, blah, blah. And it like drives up all of his traffic from Twitter to InfoWars. That might be one angle on it. But yeah, the other thing is like the Proud Boys got censored with Gavin McInnes and all them too. And I'm actually really glad that those people are getting censored, because it's going to mobilize them into being more radicalized, because they're just kind of sitting back and like looking at shit as it happens and the world goes to flames, and they're like, well, at least we're not Richard Spencer, but like you, basically to these people you are. And like the evidence of that is you getting shut down off of these platforms that Spencer was shut off of few months ago, or not even a few months ago, but generally the people around the alt-right are getting shut down around Twitter, and that's my point, not necessarily Spencer himself. So yeah, hopefully that acts as a vector for mobilization, as Julian would call that.
I'll give a few more perspectives of like what my immediate, like, because again, I'm not really engaged in the whole Alex Jones sphere, because it's not, I'm aware of it obviously, and I have no, like, I think voiced this before, I don't really have a problem with those outlets. Maybe they are distractions, but obviously you were asking, one of your questions was, how do we attract people of that degree? And I don't know like that's feasible or even wanted, when you have mass movements of potentially, I'm not an IQ fetishist at any point, but I do understand there's a level of intellect required for abstract thinking and complex ideas, and most people don't want to engage with that because it's quite scary, I guess. I'm myself as well, I'm not professing some immunity to this. I'm sure there are ideas that I would be hesitant to adopt if I was confronted with them.
Right. What I was going to say. Oh, go ahead.
Go on.
Sorry.
No. Add?
Okay, well, I'll respond to that then, and I'll say that I think there's a way of getting these people on board without getting them onto like all these crazy conspiracies. Like I think Trump was a good example of that. He kind of mobilized like 100 to sub 100 IQ, like right wing blue collar populist movement. And yeah, you might not be able to get them to understand like Alain de Benoit or Michel Foucault or whatever, but you'll definitely be able to get them to understand the basic issues without getting them astray into all these like crazy side endeavors.
I agree, but then I would add just certain things are potentially, for example, like fluoridation is something. Like there's a lot of truth kernels in Alex Jones's stuff. So if it's blanketed, like there's some theories that say like you've got to, for like plausible deniability, you've got to blanket the truth bombs with the rest of the retarded shit, and that would mean that some people would argue, oh, it distracts from it because it means people who disregard some of the stuff won't be able to filter in the truthful things because they'll disregard it all. But so it has both an equalizing effect, I think, there because. And maybe there's truth kernels to even the crazy stuff, and he could be right on those things. Maybe it is Chinese communists,
Well,
So
he is right on some stuff. Like I won't even deny that. But like what I'll say is like a lot of these issues, like what he focuses on, like the fluoride and like Sandy Hook and all of these things. The key issue is like he wants to defend certain things. Like he wants to defend like food and safety and that kind of stuff. Like okay, you can do that affirmatively without going into all the particulars of it. You can defend the Second Amendment without talking about the Sandy Hook conspiracy theory about crisis actors or whatever. So there's like practical ways around it. You could use a right wing environmentalist perspective where you say we want clean drinking water, we want clean food that's organic. That's a way to tackle the GMOs if you're concerned about that. But ultimately, I think those are kind of side issues, like I said, because the main issue is like immigration and like basically the hatred directed towards whites and specifically like white male working class people. That needs to be counteracted and directly confronted.
I'd agree. Maybe I'll leave that alone for a little bit because I think we could go back and forward on the relevancy of like spitting out like pretty wild conspiracies and what effective like advocacy that can play. But I'll quickly do my other two immediate forms of thinking on the subject, which is something that came to mind is the Donald Trump and Alex Jones relationship. I think you guys spoke about that and maybe taking down. And so this is a kind of two-part thing. But the first part was Alex Jones having Donald Trump appear on his show after the election. I think this was a really profound thing because obviously nobody really gave Alex Jones, well, not nobody. It was quite easy to discount Alex Jones as whatever wild and claiming to have connections with Trump. But when Trump actually comes on his show and says, I don't know if you guys watched the interview, but he says like, I couldn't have done it without you type thing. This is like a really profound moment, I think, for Alex Jones and his viewers and things like that to feel a real connection to Donald Trump. And so I think it's an undeniable connect between the two, and then we can start to think, does this mean it was an attack on Trump? Does this mean Trump was trying to protect him previously and is no longer capable of protecting him? The question is raised, what is Trump doing about this? Does Trump want to help him anymore? Has Trump tried to distance himself from him, etc., etc.? Or is this again like a Trump? Because obviously we know Trump has problems with these not the same services like YouTube or whatever, but has problems with internet censorship, and there is a long game at play right now, looking to try and nationalize some of these things to gain more control over the whole and like the severe left wing sway of these new media, if you will. Any input on that one?
Yeah, we need power basically. Like Vox Day was talking about in terms of, first of all, interesting that you mentioned the Alex Jones Trump connection. Like I think I mentioned that yesterday. I think you said, but yeah, basically, like I think Trump needs to act somehow on securing Alex Jones's platform, or he needs to like help support Alex Jones in creating a new platform and some kind of endeavor like that. But basically, like we need a center of power. We need centers of power, not even one center of power. And like part of the problem is we have none of the infrastructure that we need to. So like we need people who know about like computer programming and stuff to set up like domain registrars. Like we need to set up like payment processing systems, like people with financial and legal knowledge and computer programming knowledge to get some of these things going. So I've been looking into some of those areas to try and help out, and I don't know. I basically know nothing about it, but like if I take like 5 years to learn about that kind of stuff, that might be able to help.
Well, that was, I guess, part of the end of my point, which is these things happening have a kind of motivating factor towards like the normie person who when this is raised as an issue, then people are more, as you said yourself, more motivated to think about what can I do to counter this in the future. People are going to start to look at how they can control currencies and stuff like that because payment processing is shut down. Yeah.
Okay, so I just realized so what are the things that are necessary? All right, so funding is okay. Getting kicked off of social media is a problem. So obviously we need some kind of social media for ourselves, clearly. Another issue is people getting doxxed or having their jobs taken away. So we're going to have to find some way of having implicitly pro-white businesses or whatever. Fine, great. That's a good thing to do. And funding is also an issue. So we're going to need to have, yes, our own payment processing platform sooner or later. But one of the issues with that is that if your domain registry is from some other company or whatever, then all they have to do is say, "Oh, we don't like that guy, so we're taking away your domain name." We need to have our own hosts. We need to be hosting our own domains. We need to have our own servers. We need to have our own complete complex. I think that without having our own infrastructure, we're dead in the water from the get-go. And in some sense, what I'm advocating here is, Sin has said things. There are many people that are on the same page here, and I agree with all of them, which is basically we need a tandem society. In some sense, we need to have parallel working infrastructure so that as the radical left increasingly goes hard authoritarian, they go hard Orwellian, we need to have some kind of an alternative that is protective of our own people and ideas.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, what we really. Oh, go ahead.
Just the focus is on servers. That's the focus. It's on hosting. Okay, that's
right.
All.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and the thing is that a lot of these people, like alt-right people, actually probably have enough money to do this, but they just haven't done it for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe they think if we stay within the mainstream, that we'll be fine. And that was probably Gavin McInnes's probably strategy. But like people like Alex Jones, dude, he makes enough money. Like he probably makes like at least $1 million a year, at least. So like, why can't he take some of his fucking money and use it for some sort of platform like this, like you're talking about, where we basically just have like a free speech YouTube or something like that, and you can't take it down because like we own our own servers and whatnot. And
yeah, Alex Jones could never fund a YouTube operation. YouTube costs hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well, it doesn't have to be exactly like YouTube. My point would be that it would function like YouTube. It would be like, instead of YouTube as a centralized platform with like data storage and all that, you'd have like peer-to-peer connections, kind of like BitChute or something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, BitChute already exists. I mean, I hear what you're saying, I do agree.
Well, then migrate the platform, right, from BitChute to somewhere else, because I'm pretty sure they're under the boot of the hate speech mob.
It's going to happen. Everything is going to be under attack. This is why I'm, like, just as of this stream, as of this moment, I think that our own servers and hosting is going to be an important factor in the future.
So I'll add my last point, or kind of like the immediate thinking. I didn't do too much on this, as I said, because it's unfortunately not that interesting. A lot of people are making this about censorship, and Alex Jones is an important figure, which if I was to kind of give a default, I'd say not actually like my problem. I know some people say but then it just continues on further and further. But there could be a potential again, something similar to what John was saying. Maybe getting these audience for yourself is it could be fortuitous in that same regard. But these are all different things. One thing, again, thinking of a line of thought that Alex Jones is influential and an ally of Trump. Something that occurred to me. It was a friend that I think told it to me back in Donald Trump's election, like I think 2016. Was talking about 4chan and the likelihood that 4chan will be taken down in Donald Trump in 2020, pretty much the 2019-2020 election. I parroted this before. I think I was laughed at by Jakey Jake, which is whatever. Like, I don't expect much from that guy. There's my little jab. But somebody, again, I was privy to somebody posting something about Alex Jones and this having a similar thing of them taking down Alex Jones because as like a preparing for the 2019 cycle. I think this is probably a high likelihood as well, that this is taking down pro-Trump voices it's going to be just a cumulative thing, and this is just one small thing that they're planning on doing for many more. So you could potentially, to try and validate this line of thinking, look for other hugely influential parts of maybe like Breitbart. I don't know if people actually, I'm not, again, engaged on that side of the internet, but I don't know how influential that was. Looking at, let's say, like more shill posting on 4chan, I wouldn't really advocate spending too much time on 4chan, but that could be a potential. See if they're ramping up their efforts like a year before it really even starts, because that would be smart, right?
Well, yeah, I think what's going on with Alex Jones and Gavin McInnes and H3 and so on, I think this is a test balloon. I think the concept is it's twofold in a way. See how the public reacts and see what the net impact will be. So, for example, this is immediately before the midterm elections, which means that they get to run this test balloon twofold. First, how does the public respond to these censorship programs? And second, how do these censorship programs impact the midterm elections? And I think they're going to use that as a model for how to deal with the 2020 election. That's my honest opinion.
John, or no? Because I'm going to now derail completely if you don't want to add to that, John. Okay, time for the derailment.
Yeah.
No, go for it. And here's my final little, it's just going to be shit posting. But Alex Jones is Hicks. Have we seen this?
I've seen it.
I
mean, I've heard the assertion, but I mean, the timbre of the voices of the two guys is totally different. The only thing that they share is a similar physiognomy, and that's about it.
Have you seen? So you obviously haven't spent too much time in the conspiracy of that, because supposedly the same manager and things like that. There's a lot of. I'm not even really going to seriously advocate this. It's quite funny. The locality. They're both from Texas. They both have the voice and such like that. If you change it a little bit, or people have pulled audio from when Hicks was doing kind of like a lower voice, and they both share like the manager of Bill Hicks is a close friend of Alex Jones, and then on top of this, Alex Jones has pretty much admitted when he was interviewing that guy on his show, admitted himself to being Bill Hicks type thing. So I don't know if Alex Jones was taking the piss while doing it or whatever, but he's called himself Bill Hicks. There you go. There's my derailment.
Okay. All right. That's cool.
So he's a complete shill of some type of Illuminati mind control and whatever.
That's almost as good as my time travel conspiracy about John Teeter. Do you remember that?
I didn't hear it. Sorry,
dude. I think you're on the stream. We were talking
maybe
about we were talking about this guy from who's from 2000.
Oh yeah, no, I googled it. Yeah, I've seen them.
Yeah,
we were talking about time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, I agree.
Yeah.
I like to like obviously, well, not obviously, with this Alex Jones, Bill Hicks one, I don't really care to like which way, like it's not relevant to me. But I also think it's quite fun, and this is again maybe why I'm not anti the. I find Alex Jones to be funny, maybe nowadays. When I first saw him, I
Me
was like,
too.
what the fuck is that? But if you take him like not serious at all, and obviously I'm not sitting there buying his super male vitality, I think that's a bit of a scam. But technically, it's just vitamins. So if it gets people to take their vitamins and stuff, it's probably a good thing. Again, so I can't see much negative about the guy. I know a lot of people think he's an absolute shill because he won't discuss what is obvious things, but it might just be because that's his way of approaching and getting people to go down the rabbit hole a little bit more.
Why can't
Yeah.
he even advocate for his own cause? I mean, what would possess somebody to go out there and blather about the Chinese communists?
He needs to name the white male. That's what he needs to do.
Yeah,
He needs to name the fellow whites. Do you
It's
know
funny.
Alex Jones actually did talk about Israel once on a live call-in show? It was pretty interesting.
So, like, I wasn't even joking that much when I said it might be the Chinese communists, because I do, and obviously this is technically like legal to say in any country, and not a taboo thing. There hasn't been any conditioning for people to say Chinese communists. Like I can say, and nobody like I don't think that invokes any feeling of guilt or I shouldn't be saying this, blah blah blah. But also, additionally, this is a funny point because I think it was one of the first conflicts I had with Eche, which is or Eke, sorry. He was talking about China and India and that whole problem. I think it's funny that if you look back at Trump's campaign, there was a lot of discussion on of China. Being where I am, and I'm sure you, Julian, would have a much more awareness of the Chinese invasion that's currently happening, the effects on property in New Zealand and Australia and Canada, all over Europe is being flooded. That
It's over here in the States too. There's okay, so I have to, because it's so funny. I used to work at a job and this chick was hired and she spoke with a Chinese accent. And so I looked at her and I asked her, "Oh, where are you from? Are you from Taiwan or the mainland?" And she looked at me and she said, "I'm from Canada." And I was like, dude, no.
Dude, what the fuck?
No. And
Chinese espionage.
She stopped talking to me after that. Anyway, go on.
Chinese espionage is a huge thing, stealing of and again, so back to the conflict I had with Eke at the time, we were talking about militaristic expansions of China. They are very, very wealthy at the moment. They have benefited hugely from the last 40 years of kind of like unvetted free trade towards a communist country. When you look at the sentiments of the Chinese Communist Party (CCP), and kind of what the people from there think. They do everything for the betterment of their own country, and they've been fighting an ideological war. They are not Western in that sense. Again, I'm not speaking from an absolute knowledge because I'm not Chinese. I haven't been to China. I have a friend who spent a decent amount of time. I've engaged with trade with Chinese. I've engaged with intellectual banter. I've had friends who are immigrants and things like that, and understand the manner in which they become immigrants. It's a business to pretty much rot the system of Western countries to get Chinese kind of chain migration to happen. It's the financial, like the state of that country printing its own money and stuff like that. The currency warfare that they're engaged with, just previously announcing the petro yuan, which is, if you again into like whatever conspiratorial things, if you think back to the 2000s and 2010s, the discussion of trying to replace the US petrodollar because that is the hallmark of American power. This is maybe what people discuss. The reason why Saddam Hussein was announced an enemy of the United States of America and then hung to death. He died really quickly. It was why Gaddafi was probably killed as well. He wanted to make a gold-backed denier because per capita, Libya was one of the most gold-rich countries in the world, and it would have absolutely destroyed the American economy, even worse than it is. But again, sorry to be a little bit kind of chaotic with that thinking. I just wanted to. I'm not an expert on this by any means, but it's an interesting idea if you engage in an idea that, like, we all obviously talk about our fellow whites as a, not all, but some of us decide to talk about that as a prevalent issue. It's funny that he calls them communist Chinese, because again, and this is from Jewish-backed sources, they announce themselves as hugely responsible for the communist takeover of China. Likely, like many other places of communist-backed people. But sorry, where was I going with that? Just thinking outside of the box, we obviously make a very important idea that our fellow whites are really responsible for a lot of things, but potentially there could be other big players. And if you want to kind of take an even hand, and this would obviously favor our fellow whites a lot, but they want to kind of get rid of some of the responsibility for a lot of things. If we say that Chinese have agency and act in according with that agency, then they are a huge threat geopolitically to whites.
I enjoy the leap forward language there, by the way, but go ahead, Ichi.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, apparently Google is actually working with the Chinese government on certain algorithms. And there are a couple, I think, I mean, there's some tech companies that apparently are doing something with, I can't remember which ones they were, but they're doing something with the Chinese government. And excuse me, sorry. One of them is Google. And I couldn't help but think to myself, well, there may be something to Alex Jones's assertion if you take that seriously. I'd have to look into it because again, I'm only half awake right now. Sorry about that, but yeah, there actually could be something to that, and we do know that the Chinese they wanted to do the what was it, that weird social program for, like, you get super bonus points for loans or whatever if you're like a good citizen, but if you're a bad citizen, like this weird algorithm takes away points and makes it difficult for you to live. And apparently that's being rolled out in China now. And I mean, just look at the way that the left is here in America is going. Like, they totally want something like that. They would love to have that.
They want a Chinese-style social credit system in which they basically use the data that we've typed into Google and whatnot to determine whether we can get loans or whether we can even live, probably. I mean, they basically are going like full fucking techno-Bolshevist, and like there's nothing stopping them. So that's terrifying, and that's why we need to be amprim.
It's really, I mean, they used to talk about this all the time in the conspiracy theory circles, but there's something to it, which is that once you move away from a cash society and directly into a cashless society, that means that social currency, that social credit system is 100% in control of your life. Because if they
actually, Alex Jones, he talks about that. Alex Jones talks about that, and I agreed, actually, because I thought about, like, what if my bank were to, like, label me a hater or something like that and just shut me down or whatever. Oh, that's
Martin
crazy.
Zellner has experienced, I think, 12 personal bank accounts. Martin Zellner is an Austrian dude who's a part of, I think, Identitary Europa, if I recall. I don't know.
Yeah, Generation Identity, actually, I think.
I just wanted to say on the Chinese thing, so the parallels between what Trump says about China and obviously what Alex says about China, and if we consider them in cahoots to try and raise some awareness or win some elections and such, they both advocate China and not our fellow whites as the main enemy at hand. And I'll just add on to the point of China being kind of like this communist, like, or whatever you want to call it, like the techno Bolshevik, whatever. It is an ideological country. They have fully drunk the Kool-Aid, and yes, they are trying to instill kind of like things where it's a social credit system. 2 points. they already have like mass amount of surveillance. Where, for example, I've seen things that people steal toilet paper, and they have cameras outside of the toilets, and they'll come arrest people for stealing toilet paper and shit like that out of like public restrooms. But also
Holy
another
shit.
thing you'll need to know is they already have a tiered kind of like social system where you get to move to the good city if you are a good person. Like imagine
Oh yeah.
Hunger Games tier thing. They have from like 1 to 10 rankings of cities. As a vacation person, I'm forgetting the word completely. As a what's the word? Tourist.
Expat?
As a tourist, you will
Oh.
only ever get to see 10 and 9 ranking cities. So imagine that in kind of like the Hunger Games mentality, you only get to see the top tier things, but everything is fancy and nice. There is all the way from 8 to 1, like, and 1 is where like the mass pollution and things like red rivers and stuff like that, and people just drop dead all the time. You'll never ever see those. Like there will be a military guy shooting you as you're trying to leave the tier 9 city. And again, this is how kind of communist countries or of that tier function within regards to allegiance to the political system is there's a shitload of government jobs. And this is typically how people make a lot of, because the government's quite corrupt as well. If you have a government official in your family, you pretty much live like a king because he decides what property is developed. And so obviously he gets paid off massively by the development companies to allow that pollution to happen and or whatever, things like that. So again, it's a credit system that the Communist Party already kind of has, and they just want to perfect it more. Or another, it's a small point that I kind of already brought up, but we still refer to China as a communist country. And if we kind of understand communism as the antithesis to nationalism or globalism, which is kind of what communism is when taken to its logical conclusions, yes, you've had some type of iterations of communism that were more nationalistic. You could argue China is that to a degree, but maybe the people who want to usurp the current Chinese party want to use that as a model to affect the rest of the world. It is a very real enemy, and this is why it's interesting to me for him to be for Alex Jones to be criticized for stating that, when a lot of Americans, I think, look past the, and even a lot of, don't get me wrong, it's like right here in Australia, they're actually in our military colleges taking our government secrets. We're training them, by the way. Like they come in and train in our, lots of the lecturers and stuff in our actual military colleges, ex fucking like the CIA version of the China. And we just let them in.
Yeah, that's insane. And I'm pretty sure we do the same in America and Canada and European countries.
And
So,
I don't know if you read when I posted these things, but it's since the 70s. Like this is like since we opened up, Australia was the first country to open up to China under a Prime Minister named Gough Whitlam. I'm pretty sure it was Reagan, no, it was Nixon that followed suit, and then Maggie Thatcher as well over in England. And that gave like communism such a legitimacy. And it's been 40 years that that's just been chugging away. So yes, there's been cultural Marxism on the homeland. In a way, you could argue that Russia kind of effectively cleansed itself of a lot of the really toxic communism and is trying to regain some semblance of normality to them. So obviously the pro-communists really retracted their support of Russia as a viable state, and it's been punished ever since, kind of globally. China, on the other hand, has been flourishing. And so you have Trump come in and say, China, China, China. You know, this was his election. Like, I think this, because obviously there was the Mexico as well. But Chinese trade is what he focused on. But again, the money is an important part of geopolitics. And it's technically how war is played out. If you see what, there's a few different militaristic aspects to this, but financial warfare, even when it comes to, like, let's say I'm shooting you, the problem that America has is the equipment that they have is so expensive. The Soviets and some of these like Middle Eastern countries, they just developed tactics where they would attack with kind of like this is I guess okay, well, like this, it's a StarCraft analogy, but it's Zerg rushing. Like they have very cheap units and they would just destroy really expensive high-tech units, and so it's ineffective. For example, aircraft carriers are billions of dollars. and they have these strategies where they literally on speedboats with rocket launchers, and they'll just drive like 100 speedboats that cost thousands of dollars each, doesn't matter, with rocket launchers to kamikaze into the hulls of these aircraft carrier. That's the warfare that is projected against the United States. And when you look at how diplomacy is enacted, it's tariffs, trade tariffs, and things like that, which like that's what's against Russia, and it will eventually starve somebody out. Technically, this goes all the way back to World War II. Obviously, you had the boycott, the glass night or whatever, crystal night, things like that. That was how they decided to play out the war, because they knew what that does to the person on the ground. Makes them starve to death, makes them unable to, let's say they're a taxi driver and fuel doubles in price, makes them incapable of providing that. It's really devastating. So China, I think, I'm not too engaged in the whole thing, but it is very naive to look past China as a relevant player. And I think Trump backs that up.
I agree with your statements, sir.
So if we agree with those premises, then Alex Jones saying the Chinese communists isn't that far-fetched. And so
well, it's not.
I still find it comical. I find it. I see the irony. Yeah. By the way, I do. No, I'm not trying to deny the counter to it, because when I hear it as well, I'm like, yeah, what a fucking idiot. We know who it is, not the Chinese communists. But it's like, what if you give him agency as a person and say he's trying to do something with his performative art? Then the statement of who it is the reason he's trying to make anti-Chinese.
Well, it also could be. I know a lot of these companies, like Eke said, basically cooperate with the Chinese government. So it's not that far off. But we know who the real problem is. It's the blue check marks.
Yeah.
Those the blue check mark aristocracy. That we need a new aristocracy of non-blue check marks.
Revolt against that blue check mark.
I think
exactly.
It sounds quite intellectually lazy to say, but I think this is something I realized maybe a year and a bit ago, is it actually is a kind of default thing you can say is just communist. I know a lot of people on the alt-right don't like that because it doesn't have enough emotion behind it, and it's kind of been discredited for a long time, back to kind of McCarthy era. You can't just you have to engage with communist ideas for some reason. But for a long time, it was just I can call it communism, and that's the whole kind of right rejection of that. If anything was communist for a long time in America and Australia and stuff, it was they'll bash communists up, that's you're a commie scum type thing, those type of rhetorics. And now we say it kind of ironically, but it's still valid to use as a anti-communist platform.
But I think that if you get it too much into the whole anti-communism thing, communism, China isn't really communist anymore. It's just a kind of corporatist, technocratic state that's inherited a unilateral party from the communist era. And within our own societies, what we're seeing is the effects of the modern environment on ideology and ideas, and also insofar as ideas themselves tend to propagate mimetically through time. Well, I'd say it's probably more accurate just to go and say it's the Jacobin spirit of the French Revolution, of which communism was imbued with for a time, and now that's kind of shifted to this neoliberal capitalism, which the left finds far more effective at breaking down the concrete and essential grounds of meaning that it hates.
100%, but I think still the power of a very simplistic phrase, and because of the history of that word.
Yeah.
And I'd also add.
But do we want to get these boomers this is Reagan tier posting, and the boomers come out frothing at the mouth about the damn commies?
Well, you might be able to get their money. They've got a fuckload of money. You might be able to actually get them to use their money for something positive. And I want to add a little bit, because we talked about neoliberal kind of capitalism. Technically, this is just communism for me and you know, what is it they say, like welfare for me and not for thee type thing. Like the corporations get massive bailouts constantly. Like in Australia, it's a big discussion at the moment. Farmers, I think you guys are having exactly the same thing, ironically, but we're in winter and our farmers need a bailout, and you're in summer and so your farmers need a bailout, your soy farmers or something in America. But here we actually have beef farmers that provide a legitimate, not fucking soy boy stuff. But it's not like ma and pa, like this is a striker talking point, but it's really true. It's these things. Farms are not what we have, this mental image of this like lone farmer on the range with his shotgun and whatever. That's not. It's like literally Monsanto tier farms at this point. Like they've been fully communized, if you will. Like, but it's not. It's just the state. It's not this idea of like, obviously when I'm saying communized now, I'm thinking of like a happy little commune of hippies and shit like that. But that isn't what communism ever became or ever was even going to be. It's like these mega superstructures and iron curtain fucking, you know, force. Like it's fair to call these companies, all of them, these blue check marks. This is why I used the communist phrase, because you were talking about a war against the blue check marks. But yeah, just call them communists. That technically, well, not technically, but in a way, I don't know. I know it's very simplistic and doesn't really have any.
I mean, I agree with it. Might be good for milking, like boomer burgers,
boomer bucks,
boomer burgers. Yeah, like you get them mad as hell, and kind of Red Ice does that, because I watch some of their videos and they talk about communists and cultural Marxists and that kind of terminology. So at least some of our outlets are doing that.
Well,
yeah. Again, yeah. Sorry, go on.
Oh, there is something to be said for the for literal, actual communist infiltration into academia, and huge overlaps on a language level. Listen to the rhetoric of communists, and then listen to the SJWs. Remembering that intersectional feminism was literally created by a black female communist. So I mean, they're into it. Like, it's real. It's an actual thing. What is it? The Cortez chick, Alejandra Cortez. She's a part of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. The Democratic Socialists of America, the president, the head honcho of that particular organization, tweeted out something to the effect of, "Let's be clear, communism is good." And then a lot of other people within that organization, they retweeted and said, "Yes, we agree. We're on point."
Dude,
like,
yeah,
no,
I look at DSA accounts on, and they're not just like Irony Bro DSA accounts, like real DSA accounts. They'll be like tweeting like straight up, hammer and sickle memes and all of that shit. It's just entry level communism. It's
I guess,
and I don't mean to be a boomer when I say like DSA is straight up communist or Marxist, but like it just is factually.
Pray the DSA away.
What I'd say is that sure, you've got it's a degree of communist influence. I mean, I remember reading communist, like Marxist analysis at a certain point in my life, and sure, but I think it's just one iteration of left-wing and liberal ideas, right? And it's not so much like the confluence in the academic setting and all that is just really the left melding together different streams of its thought rather than communist subversion. And what's significant is whenever communism contradicts neoliberalism, it'll be cut off like that. Like Syriza in Greece were given the marching orders by the neoliberal establishment. So communism's kind of used instrumentally, I think, by the dominant managerial liberal order. And there's a lot of useful idiots within it.
I've got a few points I'd love to add to that. The first one I'd like to say is, to me, it's like we've had some type of amnesia, where it's like the McCarthy slur came out and then it was like, okay, and we started to intellectualize and actually, like, even though in my eyes McCarthy was right, there was huge communist infiltration in the government and currently still is. Like, and some of these are true believer communists, some of them are neolibs, whatever you want to call them. You can argue no true communism, but that's funny. It means we've adopted their shitty arguments. We're literally arguing, like, this is how good faith this position is it literally says, oh, no, that's not actually communism. We'll defend communism for you. We'll beat communism later. But for now, for this shallow argument, we're going to accept and say neoliberalism isn't communism because it doesn't fulfill any of the real tenets of it. But this is, again, a striker tier argument. But he likes arguing with the real communists and cannot deal with the neolibs, which means we should, it doesn't, which mean, I believe, again, there's really ironic parallels because I agree with what you're saying. Neolibs will usurp they use them as foot soldiers, and then they usurp them later on when it comes down to it. When it really comes down to the dollar sign, they're going to do the business deal. They're not going to have this like idealistic outlook. But there are true believers, and they are the foot soldiers. The tankies are actually what motivates and inspires people because they say we're for the people. They have this moral indignation through being a tanky. They don't get moral indignation like this is again striker tier. Sorry, I'm a fanboy. But it says like the neolibs are the common order. They are in line with all the mainstream ideas. They want to be kind of revolutionary, like punk rocker type alternative. When you tell them no, which policy of yours actually isn't advocated for by Google, it blows their mind. They hate this, and so I think a viable strategy is to force the meme of communism. Force neolibs to announce communism as bad, and it fractures they have a unification because, as you said, they've just conglomerated all these random factions into this neoliberal order because they told everybody we'll give you a slice of the pie, and everyone's eating a shit pie, and they think they actually have they've made this like side pie that tastes like shit, and they think they're eating the real pie. It's like part of the thing that awoke me to this whole faction of politics was I used to look into social benefits and stuff like that and see that the net effect it's had. Look at the Democrat-run cities and stuff like that, and why, if they profess to love black people and Mexicans and blah blah blah, why are they all doing so poorly? Why aren't they? If whites are doing badly, like who's doing better through that neoliberal rule? Obviously, we know where the wealth is concentrated, so we can, if you follow the money, if you follow the people, it's a very basic analysis. But if you follow it, you find out what it really is. This is nuanced though, and you don't really need this, especially when trying to subvert your opponent. It's intellectual honesty, and I again will engage in it any day, like behind closed doors. I'll discuss the nuances of it, but their party is not the power source of their party is the opposite of nuance. That's why they shut down discussion, because that draws out the nuance of, hang on, I thought you were for blah blah blah, but then why you want to abort all these black babies? You're for all these black lives and blah blah blah, but then like what's that stupid Planned Parenthood? Planned Parenthood just like is responsible for the death of like millions of black babies. I thought you loved black people, but you want to abort all these black babies. You can easily crush these people with an actual nuanced intellectual approach, but that's not what the playing field is.
No, I certainly take that point. I mean, I'm all for using that language that'll appeal to existing narratives.
For an interesting, again, it's a very low tier analysis, but it was an interesting, neat little thing to me at the time when I saw it. This whole phrase democratic, like when we look at the democratic, People's Republic of whatever, this is a common, like they pretty much announce it in like really simple memetics of like words. I think displays what they're fully honest within their statement, and the fact that the left-wing party in the United States are the Democrats says, I know it's very hard to meme Democrat as a bad thing, but I think if you draw out, like you just go through Africa or go through some of these Asian countries and see how many of themselves call themselves democratic. That's not an accidental thing. Like they always advocate for being for the people, but then obviously later on never do. But I think again, tying Democrats to communists, forcing them to own it, and then later on they will obviously disown it because they can't be consistent with it. It then turns the tankies against them, and the tankies will become full nationalists. This is what again happened in Russia. You had the Bolsheviks, and then Stalin came in and realized, oh, these guys don't like Russians. They fucking hate Russians. And so what did he do to all of them? Like the tankies will go ballistic.
Yeah.
So
it's an interesting point. Just like examining how left-wing ideas, different factions within the left relate to themselves is a topic in itself, and then also the way you can exploit that to open up fissures and for rhetorical attacks.
Yeah, of course, it's a huge another conversation. I just brought it in because I think it's part of the rhetoric of Alex Jones, which obviously, because we're engaged in like a nuanced sphere where we've done all the calculations, we understand some of the various things about it, but we don't want to make a really reductionist argument like communist, you know.
Yeah.
But it's almost like
the
it's
thing
very
with the
necessary. Go on,
tanky,
sorry.
the thing with the tankies is really interesting because in the continent of Europe, like for example in France, I'm pretty sure that this sort of thing has already happened where they've had like a third position coalition or like an anti horseshoe coalition, basically, like where they have like communists and like far right nationalists like in an alliance in one party because they're both against the neoliberal like French order. So it's interesting that you bring that up, but
I
I'm
think
not
that's the
aware
current
of.
state of Italy. If you look at
Yeah,
the coalition formed in Italy right now, and Italy is completely anti-EU and all that stuff, and I'm pretty sure it's pretty much nationalists with Marxists.
yeah. The league is like right wing nationalist, kind of almost like secessionist in a way, but they strayed away from that, and then they allied with the Five Star Movement, which is like, yeah, like you said, like populist, more socialist, and but just generally, they both have the same goals of like crushing the neoliberal establishment.
Yeah, it's a complete paradigm shift. The Five Star Movement's like a new left.
Which again is like some of the hesitation that I get from, I think, various different factions of people who consider themselves liberal of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them want kind of these protections that they're granted under this liberal order. I don't know that like this is a Greg Johnson, I think, position where it's like, what do people actually? What is freedom? Is it freedom from or freedom to? And so I think we've been in a paradigm of freedom to, especially in America. Their form of liberalism is we want freedom to offend, we want freedom to fuck ourselves up on drugs, we want freedom to do all these things. I don't know that that's deep down what people actually want. They want freedom from persecution. They want and so I guess freedom from persecution equates to freedom to do something, but it's a little bit less strong of the two, and it's more of the protection order. And I think a lot of people who are hesitant to look into third position philosophy, I think that's where it spawns from. And this, I'm not entirely against. It's weird because again, it's a full. I think I've expressed this on air before. I came from a libertarian mindset, but I think a lot of people intellectualize through that and see that nobody really wants that raw um death, what do they call it, like the McFucking child soldier and stuff like that with my McNukes and things like that, like all the memes against ANCAPs. Typically when I would always defend um libertarianism or anarcho-capitalism, it was under a proviso that I had a very strong faith in human compassion and and I believe this is true. Before kind of like a state imposed charity, I know that they existed. I know that there are good and bad people, but I'm saying I believe in the prevalence of the good of the people.
Mm-hmm.
You could equally just give that power to one governing body and elect these good-willed people. As long as we have good-willed people in our office, then state government fulfills these charitable parts of what we want. So I'm not specifically anti-tanky in some of their ways, and in a different era, I may have, back in the 60s, I may have been a communist, and I know that. Not because I think they were arguing for very separate things, but they got usurped, obviously, by different ideologies.
Yeah, well, it's all very interesting. I think we should probably start thinking about wrapping up. Yeah, so let's go from left to right. Give us your closing thought, Eche. Eche may have drifted off.
Yeah, I think he said he was really tired.
Okay, Jacob, well, you go ahead.
Okay, my closing thought is if you think that Alex Jones is ridiculous, he probably is. You can view it in good faith, and I think this is a lot of the fractile parts of the right. Is we don't give. We always think that other people are shilling for different things, but potentially they've just got a different. This is a very leftist kind of relativistic perspective, but they've got a different way of maybe achieving the same ends. You don't have to. I'm kind of against counter signaling, apart from very clearly negative agents. Freedom of speech is kind of a vacuous term and doesn't really win too many things. Right now it's being used, but I think it's important to keep in mind that we want to maybe, like, I'm quite for internal audiences, I think it's quite important to maybe discuss it in a Spencerian model where you are honest with, we are not automatically pro free speech. We're not just going to take over all of the left, the main liberal talking points, because I think it will bite us in the ass later on. We need to be quite honest with where we actually are, and I think this Alex Jones thing's the main angle I observe it from is we want actually the state to control or have some type, because I think I'm not again privy to the different countries' legislation on it, but typically most countries have rules and regulations on the broadcasting, and some of it is fair display of different politicians and things like that. Some of it is obscenity laws and whatever else, but broadcasting needs to be controlled in a manner because it can be taken over, especially if it's free market ideas and stuff like that. You can have communist China come in and fund some really negative things towards your country. That's the whole discussion that the left tries to meme with the whole Russia taking over your election. It can lead into like something. It's so large, this idea of freedom of press, and then kind of free funding for different politicians, and how much, because broadcasting intertwines with money and how monetized it all is, it becomes a capitalist argument. Very, very nuanced. Maybe watch some Alex Jones stuff would be and laugh about it, and be more lighthearted with some things, and formulate some ideas about how you could meme some, because not everything has to be cut and dry. Some of it can be like in a more funny way, and it's still inside. It still can provoke thought. That would be my thing.
Definitely interesting ideas. And John,
Make sure to take your big boy sips, floss your teeth, remember the 4 rules, and Alex Jones is a pretty funny guy. I'll keep watching him, but I pretty much stand by what I said. I think we still would have a better martyr besides him, but ultimately, like Jacob said, I shouldn't really counter signal the guy. He does a lot of good, so that's pretty much that.
all right. Well, thanks for everybody in the chat for tuning in. We kept 14 viewers till what I assume is quite late in America. So it was nice to get the big boy gang back together again. And no doubt I will catch you tomorrow sometime. Cheers, everybody.